What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another other blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto x Yasaka x Kuroka? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The underworld was very different from what many believed it would look like. When the word underworld was spoken, many would instantly think of a dark, frightening and vile place where fire and lava were blazing at every turn and filled with toxic air that killed anyone that dared to breathe. Therefore many would have been incredibly surprised when the underworld was nothing like this description and was instead very similar to Earth, the human world, with the exception of the sky that was purple and filled with dark clouds. Though one thing many were correct in thinking was that the underworld was home to the devils, the dark race of beings that many had greatly misunderstood and believed to be nothing more than evil beings. Devil, however, were just like regular people but with bat wings on their backs and have an array of different abilities that could be used for either good or evil purposes. All devils have increased physical abilities such as strength, endurance, speed, and senses. They could even live for thousands of years and retain a youthful appearance. It made the devils a near-perfect species. The underworld was enormous, easily the size of Earth but just in a different dimension, much to contrary beliefs that thought it was underground like its name would suggest. Its lands varies with cities, grasslands, fields and farmlands, forests etc. Throughout the underworld large portion of this land was owned by various families, most noticeably the pure blood families of the 72 pillars. The devil's greatest enemies were the angels of heaven and the ones known as fallen angels. Angels that had given into the sinful natures and had fallen from heaven, which created a new species of supernatural beings. The three factions of angels, devils, and fallen angels warred against one another under the leaderships of the biblical God, the four great Satans, and the fallen angel organization, Grigori, led by the fallen angel Azazel, in a conflict which came to be known as the Great War. When the war eventually ended, each side had lost much and left the three factions in a state of conflict. However, due to a state of extreme exhaustion after the Great War and with all three factions losing their main forces, neither of the three sides wanted to continue battling. So while there was no peace between the factions, outright battles did not occur either. Many years later and after the death of the Satans, the underworld fell into a civil war with the Satan families wanting to continue their family's legacy and fight against the angels and the fallen ones, while on the other side were many of the remaining families of the 72 pillars that had been reduced to now just 34 that wanted peace and a new order. The conflict lasted for almost a decade until eventually 5 devils from 5 different families all stood together and pushed back the old Satan faction and secured the war in favor of the anti-Satan faction. Searsx Gremory, Ajuka Astaroth, Serafal Citri, Falbium Glacia Labelas and finally Naruto Phoenix. Though young, each young devil boasted incredible raw power that left many shaking where they stood and could decimate entire countries at a time. Each with their own skills set and power. Individually they were powerful but together they were near invincible. The strongest of the group, Searsx Gremory and Naruto Phoenix, were best friends, rivals and had known each other since they were in diapers. Searsx with the power of destruction and Naruto with the power of immortality and fire. The two quickly became names that struck fear into the hearts of anyone that heard their names. The civil war had taken its toll on every devil alive, but eventually the anti-Satan faction prevailed, with Searsx landing the final and deciding blow to Rizavam Levon Lucifer and securing the victory for the new devil faction. With this the old faction retreated and hid while the underworld quickly began to change under its new management. With the leaders gone, the 5 stepped up to take responsibility of the underworld and to protect its people and everyone that lived and breathed in their home world. Before this could continue, a problem arose, one that surprised many and shook the friendship between Searsx and Naruto. Despite being best friends, the two had their arguments from time to time and had their own opinions on certain matters. However, many were left surprised when the very thing that caused tension between the two to rise was not a thing or an object but in fact a person. A woman called Graphia Lucifuge. Graphia was a beautiful woman from one of the extra demon families that was seen by many as the perfect female devil. She had beauty, she had brains, she had power and had an attitude that could keep even the foulest of male devils in line. She had originally been on the side of the old faction, but after meeting the 5 heroes of the new faction she defected and became a powerful ally for the new group. She quickly stood out to everyone but none more so than Naruto and Searsx. At first she had taken a shine to Naruto and the two quickly became a couple and had spent many months together in their own bubble of love. But while Naruto had given his heart to Graphia, her eyes and her heart was secretly yearning for another. It was only a few weeks after the defeat of the old faction that Naruto had returned home to find his girlfriend's clothing spread across the floor along with male clothing that definitely did not belong to him and could hear voices coming from their room. Every step he took caused a bit of his heart to break off until eventually it shattered altogether when he found Graphia in their bed with none other than his best friend Sirzex. What happened next led to Sirzex almost being burned to a crisp and reduced to ashes as Naruto went into a fit of rage as he attacked his now former friend. It took the combined efforts of Naruto and Sirzex's parents along with Graphia, Serafal, Ajuka and Falbium to eventually restrain him and stop him from killing Sirzex. It didn't take them all long to figure out why he was angry with the state Sirzex and Graphia were in. A week after the incident, Naruto and Sirzex did the only thing they could think of to resolve the problem and decided who Graphia's heart belonged to. They fought, and what a fight it was. The fight that made entire war look insignificant in comparison and lasted for almost 3 days straight with neither of the fighters giving either a moment of rest and which shook the entire underworld to its core. Enormous parts of the underworld had been reduced to rubble and would take years to rebuild, though thankfully no one was harmed after being evacuated to somewhere safe. After the 3 days, the victor finally emerged. That day, despite his great power, Sirzex proved to have that extra little bit needed to win the match, and Naruto was defeated. Defeated and now having to watch as his best friend spent his life with the woman that Naruto loved. Both wound up in the hospital due to exhaustion and injuries that not even Naruto immortality healing was able to heal properly. Both were confined to bed rest and not to leave the bed until the doctors told them to. It was during this time that Naruto was visited by Graphia. She told him she was sorry and that he didn't deserve to be hurt the way he did, but she couldn't deny her feeling for Sirzex anymore. She loved Naruto, he was her first love, and no one ever forgot their first love. But Sirzex was her true love and the man she knew she wanted to spend the rest of her life standing beside. 2 weeks after the epic battle between the two great devils, Naruto packed his stuff and he left. He told no one where he was going, not even his family. All he left was a note saying he was going away and he probably would not be back for a long time. Afterward, his leaving the underworld moved on and rebuilt. The remaining 4 heroes of the Devil Civil War took up the mantle of the old Satans and became the new 4 great Satans, with Sirzex being the leader of the 4 and taking up the mantle of Lucifer, while Ajuka took Beelzebub, Serafal took Leviathan and Falbium taking Asmodeus. Then some time down the line, Ajuka created the evil peace system. With so few pure-blooded devil left and half of the 72 pillars now extinct, they needed to repopulate the underworld somehow, and that eventually led to the evil peace system. A system that allowed human and other creatures and people to be reincarnated and turned into devils. 200 years later, a pair of closed eyelids fluttered as the morning sun broke through the curtains and revealing the morning daylight. Continuing to flutter, the eyelids eventually opened and revealed a pair of blue eyes that shined like sapphires and stared up at the blank white ceiling. Tilting his head, the man looked at the alarm clock beside him and saw it read 8:30 before groaning. He grabbed a pillow and covered his face with it, trying to block out the sun. After a few minutes of silence, he let a loud sigh escape his mouth before he sat up forward and rubbed the sleepers out of his eyes. He was a young man in his early to 20s with tanned skin and golden blonde hair that was kept short but was very spiky. He had a lean but muscular build that was built for both speed and power, and at full height would stand around 6 feet 1. Along his right eye was a scar that went vertical and stopped above his cheek, while a few more scars covered his chest and shoulder, with one in particular still looking slightly red, indicating it was relatively new. He was Naruto Phoenix, eldest son of the current Lord and Lady of the Phoenix family, heir of the Phoenix family, and one of the great heroes of the Devil Civil War. Blinking and rubbing the sleepers out of his eyes, Naruto Phoenix's gaze left his bed and traveled over towards the window that showed the city of New York stretched around it. Since his leaving, he had traveled all over the human world and met some of the most wonderful people he could have ever met, as well as fought some of the strongest as well. He had a knack for attracting powerful opponents. As he sat there and pondered, his thoughts went back to an old and familiar wound. Flashback. Naruto entered his home with a big smile on his face as a small velvet box was clutched in his right hand. His finger was gently tapping the top of it, showing signs of being nervous. "I hope she likes this ring. Mother always said a girl's best friend are diamonds," he whispered to himself as he closed the door behind him. He had been together with his love Grafia for a year now, and he felt ready to take the next step in their relationship. Some thought it might have been a little fast, but then again, with arranged marriages always floating around in the underworld, he figured most would be positive about this. Two powerful devils like themselves marrying would have been a blessing for the underworld. It would be a positive sign for the future of their species and their home. He was about to call out when he stopped and stared at the ground where a gray lacy bra lay on the ground. Confusion appeared on his face since Grafia was not known for leaving her clothes around or even being a messy person. Heck, she slapped him many times when he left even a sock out of place. Then however, he noticed more of her clothing going up the stairs along with male clothing that he knew were not his. Seeing this made a sense of dread bubble up in his stomach as he took a slow step forward and began ascending up the stairs. Being careful not to make a sound, Naruto got to the top of the stairs and crept along the hallway and towards their room, where he noticed his and Grafia's room door was slightly ajar. As he moved closer, the sounds of moaning could be heard. At his side, the hand holding the small box shook harder the closer he got. Eventually getting to the door, he heard Grafia and another man's voice. "Grafia, Sirzex." Hearing that last name almost knocked the wind out of him, and he had to hold himself together to stop from dropping to the ground. All at once a wave of negative feelings hit him. Sadness, anger, rage, and the strongest one, betrayal. Slowly he dropped the velvet box, making a small thud while a steady stream of tears were beginning to go down his face. At his side, his fists stopped shaking and turned into fists. And then fire covered his fists and the temperature skyrocketed. "Did it just get hot in here?" he heard Sirzex ask as the Gremory male head shot up while Grafia looked confused at his face. "I think it did, but that can only mean—" She stopped when her eyes shot open in worry and looked towards the door, only to find Naruto now standing there looking at her with betrayal and heartache. "Naruto," she whispered as the two of them covered themselves up as Grafia looked at him with an apologetic look. She watched as he looked at her, his eyes shining from the angry tears, before she saw him turn his attention to Sirzex, who had gulped and was trying desperately to put his pants on. Her eyes then widened even more when she saw him move. "Naruto, no," she shouted as Naruto slammed into Sirzex and the two devils barreled out of the room and going through the wall. Grafia grabbed one of her robes and followed quickly, desperately trying to stop Naruto from killing Sirzex. End flashback. As he sat there, his thoughts briefly went to his family that resided in the underworld. The Phoenix family was one of the strongest and wealthiest of the remaining 34 families and was also one of the biggest. From the information he got on them from time to time, he now understood that he had two new siblings. Ruvel, who was his younger brother, had only been 5 when he had left his home, and now his brother had apparently gotten married and had a child of his own. Naruto also gathered that he was in the top 10 in the rating games that the new faction had created. He was proud of his younger brother, especially when he caught wind that Ruvel might be attaining the rank of Ultimate Class Devil soon. Apart from Ruvel, he gathered he had another younger brother named Riser, as well as a little sister named Ruvel, who apparently looked a lot like their mother. Thinking about his mother always made him feel guilty, and for good reason. He and his mother had always been close since he was the firstborn. While he and his father Minato Phoenix got on well enough and he loved his father greatly, his mother had always been a big part of him becoming who he was today. Layla Phoenix was the best mother he could have asked for, and he felt ashamed of the pain he had obviously put her through when he left. He just hoped she understood why he left. "You're thinking too hard again," a whispered voice said from behind him as he felt a pair of long, smooth arms wrap around his shoulder, as well as a nibbling feeling coming from his ear. Naruto patted the smooth arms and let out a dry chuckle before he turned his head and looked at the beauty that leaned across him. The person behind him was a beautiful woman with long blonde hair, gorgeous amber eyes, and carried a playful smirk on her face as she nuzzled into him. Though the most noticeable features she carried were the golden furred ears on top of her head and the 9 gold tails with white tips at the end. "I'm surprised you're up so early, Yasaka-chan. Usually you're a late sleeper," he said, and let out a low chuckle when she slapped him on his bare chest while pushing her assets against the back of his head. I would, but I have this particular itch that needs to be scratched, she purred as he raised an eyebrow. I was hoping you could help me with it. You're insatiable, you know that, he said, making the woman grin. What were you thinking about? You looked lost there for a moment, she asked, having been watching him silently for the last 5 minutes. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, he just said one word. Home. She now sighed as she rubbed her cheek against his, showing him that she was there for him. She knew the main reason why he had left home, and her heart did go out to the devil. Then perhaps it's time to go home. I think nearly 2 centuries is long enough, don't you think? She told him, having noticed in the last few years he had this faraway look on his face when he visited her. Perhaps, but then again I have acquired a nice little quiet life outside of the underworld. It'd been a while since any angels, fallen or other type of creatures have dared to attack me. I think the message finally got across. Maybe it might have been due to the fact that you gave that foolish seraph quite the beating the last time you two met. When someone beats a seraph, I'm sure word gets around. The guy was asking for it and you know it. He kept bothering me with his, my holy flames are stronger than your demonic flames. I think we have proven who the strongest now is. She nodded but traced the scar going down his eye. But he did leave a mark on you either way. He shivered a little at her touch as his put his hand over hers. It's just one more to add to the collection. He let out a low sigh before a small smirk appeared on his face. He turned around quickly and pinned the beautiful kitsune onto the bed while spreading her legs wide with his knees. Now, didn't you say you had an itch? Well, I suppose I could spare some attention. After all, you look after me so well, he muttered, getting a coy smile from the woman before they engaged in making out along with other things. An hour later, Naruto sat on the edge of the bed as he put a pair of black jeans and grabbing a red shirt from a bag by the bed. His special friend was currently in the shower. The woman's name was Yasaka, a kitsune yokai and Naruto's first friend he made when he left the underworld. He had met her by chance many years ago when he was traveling through Kyoto, and the two met after she interrogated him. Though rough at first, the two steadily built a friendship over the years, and Naruto would regularly visit Kyoto to visit his longtime friend and catch up. Looking at her, most would have thought she was just another pretty face, but people could not have been more wrong. She was incredibly powerful and boasted an enormous amount of yokai and had great control over the foxfire that kitsune were famous for. Then turning into a fox the size of a skyscraper made most collapse from a heart attack. Their current situation, though, was one of friends with benefits. It was thanks to Yasaka that he slowly began to get over Graphia, and she helped him eventually move past the silver-haired beauty. While there were and would always be feelings still there, he knew nothing could ever come of it anymore. Though it was just an extra for when either of them had that scratch that needed to be itched. They didn't exactly love each other in that way, but would admit there were some feelings there that had developed over the years, and many would mistake them for a couple when they were just walking around Kyoto. Both cared for one another, had a strong friendship where either would protect each other no matter the cost, and that was enough right now. Plus, Yasaka seemed to enjoy teasing him when she could and was not shy about flaunting what natural gifts she had been given when they were in private. "You almost ready, Yasaka-chan?" he called just as the door opened and Yasaka walked out with a towel wrapped around her body. Since Naruto was leaving later that day, they were going to spend some time together whilst Yasaka ran some errands. "Be patient, my lovely phoenix. Us girls need time to make ourselves look beautiful," she said, winking at him and making him roll his eyes before he turned away and to give her privacy to get dressed. "Plus, I need to make sure Kuno knows she is still grounded." "What did she do this time?" he asked. Kuno was Yasaka's 9-year-old daughter. They were the spitting image of one another, and he could see Kuno growing up to be incredibly beautiful just like Yasaka. She also inherited the kitsune love of making trouble. She put laxatives in the drinks of the other kitsune again, Yasaka said, making Naruto chuckle and shake his head in amusement. 20 minutes later, and dressed up in a traditional shrine maiden's outfit, they eventually left as an orange symbol appeared beneath them and teleported them away. With Naruto and Yasaka, they arrived in a small garden area about a mile away from Yasaka's home before the two began walking down a small path with Yasaka's arm wrapped around Naruto's. "So where are we going?" Naruto asked as he looked around her surroundings as Naruto began walking down a dirt path. "I figured while we walk I could visit a young kitsune girl. As you know, it's our mating season soon, and this will be the first big one for this girl now that she is of age. I want to make sure she is prepared." "Mating season, huh?" Naruto said, feeling her tighten her arm around his. I remember those times too well. I got a call almost every couple of hours to come and satisfy you last time, didn't I? She gently slapped his arm while blushing slightly. Behave you. Getting rid of the blush, she turned to look at him. She's nervous. There is a boy she likes and she wants to make sure she can control herself when the time comes. You know what happens when we lose control. Yeah, do I, he muttered. He remembered it far too well. It only happened once, but Yasaka had completely given into her primal urges and lost control of them. She basically tried to jump him at every turn and got very violent about it. In the end he had to knock her out because she was becoming too unpredictable. And what about you? He asked as she looked at him. If mating season is round the corner, then have you thought about putting another bun in the oven, so to speak? The answer he got was a light laugh as she placed her head on his shoulder. Oh, maybe in a few more years. Right now Kuno is more than enough. Why you offering to help? She looked at him and saw his eyes lowered a little and he smiled weakly. I did last time. Her eyes softened as a gentle smile appeared on her face too. Yes, you did, and I thank you every single day that you did that for me. She whispered as she thought of her daughter and then looked towards Naruto as she recognized the same look in their eyes. You know you could tell her who you really are to Kuno. His reaction was a sigh which she knew was coming. You know I can't. At least not yet. I have enemies out there and even people back in the underworld may cause problems. When I feel it's safe, then we will tell her. She nodded before the two fell into a peaceful silence as they enjoyed each other's company. After an hour of trekking along the dirt path and a lot of complaining from Naruto since they could have just teleported there, they eventually arrived at the apartment of the Kitsune girl in the northern part of Japan. While Yasaka had been here a few times to meet with the girl, hers and Naruto's face scrunched up when they felt a foul presence that the two were all too familiar with. I guess you're not the only one who had taken an interest in the girl. With that, the two jumped onto some nearby buildings and leaped across the rooftops until they arrived at a small apartment building where they immediately saw the new problem. Just outside the apartment building were two men and two women, each with a pair of black wings neatly folded on their backs. Fallen angels. As the two dropped down from the roof, two more fallen angels walked out of one of the lower apartments, one with a pair of wings and the other with two pairs of wings, which signaled he was the strongest of the little group. What caught their main attention, though, was the young girl that was draped across the other fallen angel's shoulders. Yasaka saw the girl and let a low growl come out from her mouth, figuring out that they did not have any good plans for this poor young girl and would most likely try and defile her. The fallen ones were known to be a very UAL race. Let's get going. Lord Kokabiel will want to run tests on this one, the strongest member of the group said as the rest of them all nodded to his words. They stretched their wings and were about to fly when a cough interrupted them. Looking over, they saw Naruto and Yasaka watching them and leaning against a nearby car, one looking angry and the other emotionless. Yo, Naruto said with a small wave each before quickly noticed the glares that were sent their way. A devil and a kitsune, they all hissed out while the fallen with four's wings quickly went into the air to make a quick escape with their hostage. Before he could get very high, though, a powerful slam hit his chest that forced him back to the ground and land on his back. He sat there in a daze for a couple of moments before he winced at the pain, shakily stood up. All he had seen was a small flash of golden hair. Quickly he turned towards and faced Naruto. That man, he hissed out as a light spear appeared in his hand as the other fallen looked at him strangely. Sir, he never moved, one of the females said as Naruto smirked and gave him a taunt with her index finger, indicating for them to come get some. Impossible, I know what I saw even if it was brief. He hit me, no one can possibly move that fast. I guess they don't know me very well, huh, Yasaka-chan? Naruto said before leaning away from the car. She had seen him move and was one of the very few that were able to. Gentlemen and ladies, I'm afraid I will have to ask you to give me the girl. I can't let you take a potential new friend away before I even get to know her. And by the looks of it, I doubt you have any good intentions for her, he said as cracked his hands and neck, ignoring the outraged look they were giving him. We can do this two ways. The easy way or the hard way, and trust me when I tell you this. You should pick the easy way. Their response was creating a batch of light spear in their arms and in the air of various colors. All Naruto could do was sigh and scratch his head. Don't say I didn't warn you, he told them before turning to look at Yasaka. You want this one, Yasaka-chan? Her answer was a coy smile as her tails began to show and her eyes began to glow with power as fire danced around her hands. "I thought you would never ask Naruto-kun," she told him before she disappeared in a great burst of speed and appeared in front of the fallen angels. Naruto just stood and watched as Yasaka made short work of the fallen angels. Underworld. At the same moment in time, another member of the Phoenix family sat on a royal-looking patio as a number of low to mid-class devils went about taking care of the large garden that was filled with bright and warm-colored flowers. "Would you like some more tea, Phoenix-sama?" a maid asked as she stood a few feet away from Lady Phoenix with a small tray in her hands with a freshly made pot of tea. Lady Phoenix, full name Layla Phoenix, was a beautiful young woman who, despite being many centuries old, still looked to be in her early to mid-20s, with her hair held up in a ornate fashion and blue eyes that all her children seemed to have inherited. Wearing a beautiful and elegant red dress, she looked nothing short of what a queen would look like and had the power to back it up as well. She shook her head and waved her hand politely. "No thank you," was all she said as the maid nodded and returned to the kitchen to continue with her daily duties. She sat alone, not being in the mood for company right now and needed to clear her thoughts on her own. Recently her mind kept going back to one subject that made a stabbing feeling appear in her heart. Her eldest son Naruto Phoenix had been gone for 200 years and she had no idea where he was, how he was, or even if he was still alive. The only way she got any kind of information about him was from the rumors and the gossip that would spread to the underworld. While it was never enough to get a pinpoint location on her son, it was enough to find out what he had been doing at least. For many of it she was left almost having heart attacks from the things her son did. Fighting hordes of angels and fallen angels on his own, confronting a dragon king, battling a seraph. If she didn't know that her son was extremely powerful, then she would have died from worry years ago. Her son was not only a prodigy but genius when it came to hard work. He didn't get his great power from slacking off. He would spend entire days, weeks, even months training non-stop to fully control and advance his powers. Naruto's power had always been an oddity though. He had the full Phoenix powers like other members, but the first thing they noticed was his flames were not orangey red like normal fire but were instead golden. Golden demonic fire that had the potential to be as hot as the sun. They were significantly more powerful than normal fire, and even his wind affinity was nothing to joke at. Layla made sure he trained extensively in both element aspects. The second oddity that stood out about her son was his demonic power in general. It was far higher than most devils, and even when he was young his raw power was already on par with a seasoned high-class devil. Naruto Phoenix was most likely the strongest devil of the Phoenix family that there ever was, and it was because of him that their power equaled and rivaled families like the Gremory, Cetri, Astaroth and Glaciolabelas. It made her proud knowing her son was on par with the four great Satan and that he had played a pivotal role in ridding them of the old faction. But with him gone, their overall power was now below those four families, since Naruto was the ace of their family, and while her children had potential and her second son Ruvel making a name for himself, it paled next to her oldest. And then there was the Gremory family that left a bitter taste in her mouth and made her face scrunch up in distaste. Her relationship with the Gremory family had all but been severed after their eldest son and now daughter-in-law had broken her son's heart. There was a time when she and the Gremory matriarch Venelena Gremory had been best friends and had grown up together, even when Venelena was still a Biel and neither had married or had children. But after the incident and watching her friend welcome Grafia into their home happily, the two had been strained greatly and rarely conversed with one another. The Phoenix family still allied itself with the Gremory family in business terms, and Lord Phoenix still spoke often with Lord Gremory. They had even arranged a marriage between her third son Riser Phoenix and their daughter Rias Gremory. Though she doubted it would happen since the Gremory girl was doing everything possible to get out of it. "Mama," she heard bring her out of her thoughts before smiling when she saw her youngest Revel walking towards her with an annoyed look on her face. Her daughter looked like a carbon copy of her when she was her age but had her father's blonde hair like her other children par Naruto. If their hair was in the same style then they would have passed off as sisters. "What's with that face, my dear?" Revel huffed in annoyance as she put her hands on her hips. Riser took his peerage to see Rias Gremory and she still refuses to agree to the marriage. Plus she has this horrible pawn that is a complete pervert. He kept looking at all the girls' chest with this stupid look on his face. Layla Phoenix nodded and chuckled dryly as she listened to her daughter rant before she gently took her hand and led her to a seat in front of her. Taking her hair out of the pigtails, she summoned a brush before she gently started brushing down her daughter's hair. Ravel just continued to talk about the perverted boy and the Rias Riser situation while Layla offered an ear to listen. Ravel slowly turned her head to look at her mother and noticed the far-off look that was on her face. "What's wrong, Mama?" she asked, recognizing when something was wrong with her mother. She got a sad smile on her face. "I'm just thinking about your brother and wondering where he is right now." Ravel quickly understood which brother she was talking about and nodded as she shifted in her seat and clenched the skirt of her dress. The subject of her eldest brother was kind of taboo in the Phoenix home because any mention of him would make their mother sad and upset. Even her father was careful when bringing up the oldest son. "Do you think he would like me?" she asked timidly and quietly. She had never met her eldest brother since he had left long before she was born. She had seen pictures and had heard what he was like from devils that knew him. He was brave, kind, silly and protective to the people he loved and could be ruthless and cold towards those that threatened him or his people. She felt the hairbrush stop moving along her hair and get gently pulled out. Before she could say anything, she felt her mother's arms wrap around her from behind and gently squeeze her hands while her mother's lips gently pressed on the back of her head. "He will. I know he will. And when he comes back, whenever that may be, we can make new and happy memories with him. I'm sure he will love spending time with his little sister. So do not fret, my child," she whispered. The mother and daughter shared a peaceful moment together as they enjoyed one another's company as they thought about their lost family member. Beside them the Phoenix symbol appeared and the third sun riser appeared out of it with an angry expression on his face with his entire peerage aside from Ravel behind him. No rest for the wicked, she sighed inwardly as she prepared to listen to what her son now had to tell her. Back with Naruto. 45 seconds. That was slower than last time you were in a fight, Yasaka-chan. I fear you may be slowing down in your old age, Naruto teased as he watched his woman drag the now dead bodies of all the fallen angles and put them in a pile. The woman had temper when pushed the wrong way, just like these fallen angels had found out. Over his shoulder meanwhile was the young-haired girl that was still unconscious and now in his safe hands. "If I'm old, then what does that make you?" "Wizened, of course," he said, giving her a big grin which only served to make her eyes roll before placing the last body down on the pile. Watching as she moved to stand next to him, Naruto clicked his fingers and watched as fire erupted from beneath the pile and began burning at the bodies. "So what now?" "Now we go back to my home and we wait for this one to wake up. I want to make sure they tried nothing on her while they were in the apartment. Plus I need to make sure Kuno is behaving." Naruto sighed before smiling, having been used to her attitude for nearly 200 years. She knew him just as well as he knew her. Clicking his fingers again, an orange phoenix seal appeared underneath them and teleported them away, leaving the bodies to burn into nothing but ash. Sitting on a small rock in the middle of a wide open space, Naruto sat in front of a small fire as he placed a few sticks with fish he recently caught and watched them cook. The sun beat down in the sky with very few clouds being present in the sky. It was a pretty nice day in his view. After leaving the underworld and knowing he could not just stay anywhere too long due to his power signature being recognizable, his usual form of lodging was camping in dense forest areas since it gave him the best option of not being found. Being one with nature and enjoying the wind hitting his face always eased the Phoenix Devil and always put a smile on his face. Ever since he was little he enjoyed the outside. Whether it had anything to do with his family's aerokinesis was a possibility, but the wind always soothed him. It was peaceful, and peaceful is what he was looking for. Plus around his campsite he had etched magic runes into the trees that normally helped conceal his location and kept him hidden. Only someone very powerful would be able to find him and see through them. A month had passed since he left Kyoto and said goodbye to Yasaka and Kuno. He traveled on foot across Japan and was now currently nearing a small town by the name of Kuo. He normally visited Kyoto every few months, where he would stay for about a week before he left to travel again. Since he had traveled pretty much the entire world during his 200 years away from home, there was honestly little left for him to see, and more he began staying in certain countries that he enjoyed, with Japan being at the top of the list. He just found Japanese culture and the country itself very beautiful and a pleasant place to live in. As he neared the town of Kuo, He could sense some devils and even some fallen within the town, but it was nothing that he could not handle. None were above the power level of a high-class devil. But he decided to camp outside of it just to play it safe. He was aware it was the territory of one of the devil families, but he was unaware of which one. If it came to a confrontation, he knew he could handle the situation quickly. From his seat, as he enjoyed the sound of the wind breezing past him and tickling his skin, the sound of rustling came from the side of him just as he picked up one of the cooked fish. He sat and watched as a black cat with amber eyes jumped out of the bushes and began eyeing his meal. Looking down at his meal and then towards the cat, he rolled his eyes and took the fish of the stick before putting the fish a few feet in front of him. "Go on, enjoy," he said, and watched as the cat slowly came forward, sniffed the fish before began eating it hungrily. Eating silently and happily, giving the cat an extra fish since it was looking up at him with big, glossy amber eyes. He was a sucker for cute things. "You must have been hungry, huh?" he said as the cat approached him and rubbed itself against his leg and making a loud purring noise. He scratched the top of its head and got louder purrs in return. He kept it up for a few minutes before he picked the cat up by the scruff of its neck and held it in front of his face, seeing the confused look on the cat's face. "Now why don't you tell me why you are here, Devil-chan?" he asked, and saw the cat's eyes get slightly larger. "You may be able to turn into a cat, but your devil signature stays the same." Before either could respond, a new power appeared coming towards him that made himself and the cat look in that direction. He felt the cat shake a little and saw a tiny look of fear in its eyes. Looking at it curiously and knowing his hero complex was getting bigger, he placed that cat on the floor much to its surprise. "Go and hide in the tent. Once our friend is gone, you and I will be talking," he said seriously. All he got was a stare in return before the cat purred at him again and quickly sauntered into the tent and disappeared from sight. Thankfully, the large blue tent had similar runes on it and would be hidden from the world. Sighing and picking up a fish, he sat and ate while he waited. He didn't need to wait long before he heard footsteps come from behind him. He recognized the power and his eyes were narrowed as he ate. "You're either very brave or you're very stupid for coming here," Naruto muttered as a figure appeared from behind him. The figure was a man in his mid to late 20s with black hair with blonde bangs hanging in front of his face. On his face was a small black goatee and had dark pink-colored eyes. On his back, however, were 12 wings as black as night, indicating he was a fallen angel. "You're a hard man to find. 200 years continuously on the move made you difficult to track," the man spoke as grin appeared on his face while Naruto simply looked at him while not moving his head. "And how exactly did you manage to find me, Azazel?" he asked, narrowing his eyes at the now revealed Azazel. Azazel puffed out his chest. "The Grigori have spies in every country on the planet. One of my guys felt a rather powerful devil signature appear a few weeks ago by chance in Kyoto. It took a while and a lot of magic tracking, but we eventually managed to find you." Naruto eyed the man cautiously. He had never liked this man. Being the strongest of the fallen angels and its de facto leader already put him on bad terms. And from the few meetings he had with Azazel, he could see the man was brilliantly smart like a Juka, but more insane and loony. While the man was strong, it was his mind and tactics that many had to keep on their toes around. Before he fell, he was one of heaven's best and would have been a seraph if he had not given in to his desires and sins. "The last time I saw you, you kicked my ass and buried me into Mount Fuji. It took me 2 days to dig my way out of that volcano," Azazel said, pouting as Naruto ignored the stupid look on his face and just asked him straight out. "So what do you want? I doubt you just came here for the hell of it. You're very lucky I don't kill you where you stand," he spoke as Azazel gulped. "Can't I visit and talk to an old friend?" he said, with Naruto's face not changing even once, which led to him sighing and changing his appearance to a more serious one. After a few moments, the fallen ones began speaking in a serious tone as Naruto leaned in slightly to listen. In the last decade, there has been a group beginning to form that could very easily pose a threat to not only the human world but the underworld and heaven as well. This group is a little different from the other sort of groups or factions that have been put together in the past. Naruto nodded slightly while listening to what the man had to say. The group is not just solely one species but made up multiple divisions, each which has a different species of creature occupying it. Angels, fallen angels, devils, strays, magicians, yokai. You name it, they have all joined this group, He spoke serious before his eyebrows shot up in surprise when he heard Naruto chuckle. From the sound of what you're describing, I think I am correct when I say you are talking about the Chaos Brigade? He asked, getting a bigger surprised look from Azazel. You know? He asked as Naruto snorted and rolled his eyes. Of course I know. You don't think I would not know about a group like that getting together? You would have to be a fool not to take notice of something this big. But how do you know them? Azazel asked as the blonde shrugged. They asked me to join, of course. His answer got a surprised and slightly fearful look on his face, which made the Phoenix member wave his hand nonchalantly. Stop worrying. I said no. Whatever their agenda is, I could care less. I have no intention of helping them. Azazel nodded, but in his mind he knew he would have to try and keep tabs on the blonde just in case he was lying. Does anyone else know? He asked and saw Azazel shake his head. No, but I think your old buddies the four Satans are beginning to notice. I have noticed Searzex and Ajuka sending some of their peerage out more and more lately on recon missions. The actions of the Chaos Brigade is beginning to get noticeable. Not surprising, Naruto spoke before turning to look forward again. So how is my old friend Searzex? I only kept up to date on my family's well-being? From time to time I check in on my friends, but those two I have left alone for some time. Stabbed anyone else in the back lately? Azazel winced at the bitter tone he spoke in, mentally fighting over whether he should tell him about a certain piece of information. It was not known publicly around the world, but many higher-ups were aware of the situation between the three devils. What was the last you heard about Searzex and Graphia? Azazel asked and noticed the twitch in the blonde's hand when he said her name. Only that he and Graphia were living a happy life as the mighty power couple of the underworld. About 15 years or so, I think. Then you should know they had a pretty big life-changing experience 10 years ago, he said, noticing the devil's attention was now firmly on him. And what would that be exactly? Naruto asked, trying to keep his emotionless mask on his face. Azazel sighed while rubbing the back of his head before he spoke. They had their firstborn 10 years ago. A little boy, I believe, he said, and quickly noticed Naruto look away and saw his right hand was firmly grasping the earth beneath him and making cracks in the ground. After 200, he was not surprised that the wound still hurt. They fell quiet for few moments as Azazel waited for the blonde to begin speaking. I see. What's the boy's name? He whispered. Milikas. They named him Milikas Gremory. Milikas, huh? He said as his head gently nodded. That's good name. A strong name. I'm sure he will be as strong as his parents are one day with all that potential. Naruto sighed for a moment before he shook his head and went back to looking emotionless. Anyway, we're getting off track, and that's not the reason why you came here after all. So why come to me with this information? Why me of all people? Well, that's easy. I don't know what their ultimate goal is yet, but whatever it is, it can't be good, especially if members of the old Satan faction get involved, he said as Naruto got a dark look on his face. If the old faction even try, I will put them right back into the hole that they dared to crawl out of. Yes, but even you can't do it alone, Azazel told seriously. From what I can tell, they will target the underworld eventually. Whether it's people or land, a new potential war is brewing. The underworld will need you. Since when did you start caring about devils? I don't really, he said, shrugging. But many of my brethren live in the underworld, and you and I both know what war can cause. The pain, suffering, and death it brings. I don't want to see another war break out. Meaning this could be the chance for our three sides to put our differences aside and make a real peace treaty, and not this paper-thin ceasefire that we have had for centuries, Naruto said, noticing where the conversation was leading towards. In response, Azazel nodded. If we have any chance, then the best way may be for the three factions to align. They spoke for 5 more minutes as Azazel explained it to Naruto, who was half listening and half thinking about the information he is being told. If the old Satan faction really were making a move, then he wanted to make sure they got put down on a more permanent basis. You should be taking this up with the Satans. Not me, Naruto said as he got up and began walking towards the tent. As was about to enter, he stopped and turned his head. But, I will keep my eyes open, and I will at least think about the possibility of going back to the underworld, he said. He turned around to walk away but stopped when Azazel now spoke up. In that case, you think you could do a favor for me? He asked, getting Naruto's attention again. He looked at Azazel for a moment before nodding at him to keep speaking. There's a kid I want you to look at who recently became a devil. Recently became a devil under Rias Gremory. He has a lot of potential and I have a feeling he is going to be right at the center of what's to come. Hearing about some reincarnated devil under Searzek's younger sister, he raised an eyebrow. While he knew about the young girl, he never delved any further into the Gremory family than he had to. They left a bitter taste in his mouth after all. What's so special about this kid? He asked, but never got an answer back as Azazel spread his wings and disappeared into the sky. Fallen bastard, he muttered under his breath before walking into the tent. The tent itself was a magical tent, meaning it was a lot bigger on the inside. While outside it looked like a simple 4-person tent, inside it was as big as a 4-bedroom house with a small kitchen with warm-colored carpet, mats and furniture. There was even a bathing area. So Neko-chan, I hope you have some answers for me and tell me just who you are. He spoke as he looked over towards one of the bedrooms and saw a cat-shadowed figure run along the white sheet. He then watched as the cat grew and took on a human shape in the form of a woman with a very sizable bust, a pair of cat ears and 2 tails swaying from behind her. Stepping out, the woman stepped out in front of him completely stark naked and gave him a cheeky wink. Thanks Blondie-kun. I owe you one nya. 2 weeks later. So that's Rias Gremory, Naruto spoke as he stood on the top of a nearby building and looked down towards the 18-year-old girl who was currently taking part in a skirmish in front of Kuo Academy. She was a pretty little thing with the familiar red hair and blue-green eyes that he recognized all too well. If not from the hair, then he would have mistaken her for Venelena Gremory and could easily recognize her as Lord and Lady Gremory daughter despite never formally meeting her. He was currently watching as the young Gremory girl was fighting a 10-winged fallen angel alongside her peerage and to his surprise 2 followers of the church, with one wielding a holy sword and the other wielding what looked like the Durandal. I have not seen that sword in a long while, he whispered as his hand came up to stroke the scar over his eye. Scanning the school, he could sense another high-class devil along with their peerage on top of the highest building in the academy. From what he could tell, they were creating a barrier to protect the school with. The devil's signature felt strongly like his old friend Seraphal. Some kind of relation, I guess. I did hear Lord and Lady Citri had another child some time ago. He stood and watched before wincing when the Gremory girl blasted back but get saved by a brown-haired boy who he guessed was part of her peerage. They won't last long against Kokabiel, he thought as he had her arms crossed against his chest. They are nowhere near that kind of strength yet. Not even the Gremory girl can pose a threat to him. I'm actually a little disappointed. I thought the little sister of that red-haired bastard would be better than this. I guess I got my hopes up, Naruto said, twiddling his fingers before his focus went towards the brown-haired boy that stood protectively in front of her. Though there is something special about that boy, he muttered, drawing attention towards the boy and looked him over. Everything about him looked normal and he did not feel all that powerful. But what drew him was the gauntlet that covered his left arm. A sacred gear, but it feels and looks different from the others I have seen. It feels stronger. A Longinus maybe? He scanned it with his eyes and played back in his head all the sacred gears that he was aware of, had seen and read about over the years. A red gauntlet with a green gem in the center of it, he thought. After a moment of silence and he sucked in his breath. The boosted gear. I remember reading about it many years ago. The boosted gear, also known as the Red Dragon Emperor's Gauntlet. It has the spirit of the Welsh dragon, Daedrig, residing within it. It has the ability to double the user's power every 10 seconds and is one of the strongest sacred gear in existence, Naruto said to himself while shaking his head. No wonder Azazel was so interested in this kid. Naruto sighed and clicked his tongue as he turned to his left and was not surprised to see Azazel standing on a building a little ways off, watching the battle as well. He then turned his head and saw Azazel motion to the battle. I better stop these kids from getting killed. Damn rookies, he muttered before his wings shot out and went into the air. He didn't want to get involved, but he couldn't let them die, even if one of them was the sister of the red-haired bastard. Outside Kuo Academy, Issei. Rias Gremory shouted as she slid along the floor and caught her pawn Issei Hyodo before he could hit the ground, cradling his head in her lap as he tried to catch his breath. Bucko, he winced out as she cupped his face and looked around on the battlefield. All her peerage members were current down and out for the count. Her knight Kiba Yuto, Bishop Asia and Rook Kaneko Tujo were unconscious to her left with her wounded queen, Akano Himejima standing protectively in front of them. To her right the church follower Irina was out for the count while Zenobia was barely standing and using the durandal to keep herself upright. Looking behind her she looked towards Sona and her peerage and could see the sweat along their foreheads. They would not be able to keep the barrier up for much longer. "Stay behind me, bucko," her pawn told her as he shakily stood back up and the gem on his boosted gear glowed. "No, Issei, you're not strong enough," she said, grabbing his arm tightly. "You'll die in your current state." In front of her the fallen angel Kokebiel was laughing as he began listing reasons why he would not fall and how he would make their deaths as painful as possible. "Stay with me, Issei. Stay with me," Rias whispered to her pawn as she held her arms around Issei protectively, daring the fallen angel to make a move. "Time to die, Gremory," Kokebiel called out as light weapons appeared all around him. All Rias could do was gulp and grip Issei even more. It was times like this that she wished she was not so weak. Why she couldn't be more like her brother and sister-in-law. "Enough," a strong voice suddenly muttered as a blast of fire shot forward and sailed towards Kokebiel. The fallen angel deflected it with a light shield but was unaware of the spear made of fire that was thrown towards him until it buried itself into his shoulder, knocking him back and putting him on one knee. "Who dares?" he shouted, looking around frantically for the person who dared to harm him. "I dare," the same voice said as everyone's attention turned to the left of them. All they saw was parts of Naruto's body, who had his face hidden by the shadows of the night with only his blue eyes remaining visible. "You have been a thorn in the side of many, Kokebiel, and tonight I will end you once and for all," he declared as her eyes narrowed towards the fallen angel. "Fool, who do you think you're talking to?" Kokebiel shouted as light swords began appearing all around, all easily as big as cars, and made the young devils all gulp when they saw Therm. The swords could kill them at any moment. Naruto, though simple, shook his head before he decided to show this fallen angel what real power was as he released part of his demonic power. The moment he did, anyone that was remaining to stand suddenly dropped to the ground as a pressure that one had ever felt before suddenly slammed into them and kept them pinned. Even on the rooftop Sona and her peerage dropped to the ground, releasing the barrier unintentionally. Kokebiel, though, had began to sweat, barely able to stand up from the weight of this man's demonic pressure. Rias and Akeno, who were on the ground, both gulped as they felt the power coming from the mysterious man. It made their power look tiny in comparison. The only person Rias could think of that had power like this was her brother. Naruto outstretched his arms and they all watched as fire formed all along his arms, and they all felt the temperature of the air suddenly go up drastically. So much so that in only a few moments they were sweating up a storm from the sudden heat. "Take this," Kokebiel shouted as dozens of light swords flew through the air and sailed towards Naruto, who remained in his spot and looked at the attack lazily. "Boring," he muttered before he waved his hand gently, and everyone watched as thick and enormous wall of fire suddenly appeared in front of him and destroyed the enormous light words as if they were nothing. "Hotarubi," he whispered as small golden ball appeared behind Kokebiel, with the man being none the wiser that they were even there. Then just as Kokebiel was about to turn around they shot forward and each ball of fire hit one of his 10 wings and set them on fire. The screams of pain from Kokebiel was enough to make the devils wince at their opponent and try to shut it out. It looked and sounded so brutal that even when they tried to look away, their eyes just kept getting drawn back to seeing one of their natural enemies get crippled. Naruto looked across from his opponent as Kokebiel struggled to stand up as whatever was left of his wings just dangled from his back, burnt far beyond recognition. And the fire was still burning them even when there was nothing left to burn. Golden fire flickered across his arm, and before anyone could even blink Naruto was gone and had moved at such a great speed that the people that had their eyes open and paying attention only saw the movement of a yellow flash. Looking around they all heard Kokebiel wince and cry out in more pain. Turning around they all now saw that Naruto was standing in front of the man with his head hidden with Kokebiel's body as his left fist was buried deep into the fallen angel's stomach. Blood quickly shot out of the fallen angel's mouth from the powerful hit and formed a strong-looking light sword in his hand. Swinging it, it looked like it was about to connect when they watched their savior lazily move his head to the side, showing just a little of his head before quickly hiding it again. He then grabbed Kokebiel's wrist and with one tug he pulled it off and threw it to the side. "Ggghhhhh!" Kokebiel screamed before they watched Naruto grab him by the throat and threw him into the air. With Kokebiel no longer having his wings, he just sailed through the air with a look of permanent fear etched onto his face. "Who is he?" Rias whispered as her beautiful eyes focused on their mysterious savior and was looking at the back of his head that was now uncovered. He looked somewhat familiar, and the way he fought and completely destroyed Kokebiel, she had to admit it thrilled her a little to see it. A Phoenix member perhaps? But I don't recall Golden Fire before. It's definitely not Riser and it's not Ruval. Plus his hair is golden blonde. Beside her, Issei was thinking the same thing given his history with Riser Phoenix. But watching this guy, he could easily see this guy outclassed Riser many times over, and it looked like he was just playing with Kokebiel. They all then watched as Naruto cocked his fists back as fire engulfed his hand and aimed it towards the falling Kokebiel, who was only now just beginning to make his way back towards the ground. "Heiken," was all anyone heard as they watched the biggest and most powerful pillar of fire any of them had ever seen just shoot out of Naruto's hand and sailed towards Kokebiel. The pillar was easily as wide as the occult research building, and the power it had and the roar it made was like nothing from this world. "No," was they heard from Kokebiel, who watched as the fire soared towards him before he was quickly silenced as it engulfed his entire body. The entire pillar of fire went high into the air and through the clouds. Everyone who was close to the battle zone slowly managed to put their hands over their eyes and faces and shut their eyes tightly from the heat and from how bright the fire was. It remained there for about 15 seconds until eventually the pillar of fire went out as quick as it arrived. When it did, there was no sign of Kokebiel. There was no body, no ashes, no nothing. He had just been completely wiped off the face of the planet by this mysterious person who had just saved them and in a way shown just how powerless they truly were. Everyone who was watching, which was Rias, Issei, Akeno, Xenovia, Sona and her peerage, all stared at the man in sheer amazement for being able to defeat such a powerful fallen angel so quickly. While they may have been fighting him beforehand, it was not like they did much to even wound the fallen one. After a moment they watched the man turn his head towards them ever so slightly before he turned it around just as quickly and released the pressure of his demonic energy. Everyone who was down on the ground finally felt the weight lift from their bodies and could finally breathe easy again as the temperature began returning back to normal. Rias meanwhile had her eyes fixated on the man in front of them and watched as he slowly began to walk away from them. Rias had to know who this person was. "Are you all alright?" she asked as she turned to face the downed devils and their allies, who just dumbly nodded at her before Rias instructed Issei to go check on the other members, while Akeno walked over to stand by her king as they walked towards the red-haired savior. Next to her she watched as Sona and Sona's queen Tsubaki teleported beside them, the heir of Citri family having similar thoughts to her own. Seeing he was quickly leaving their line of sight, they ran over and quickly caught up with him and watched as he stopped in his tracks. Naruto felt them getting closer towards him and he had a feeling they would want answers. Rias because she had the Gremory curiosity and Sona because she had the Citri brains like her parents. He didn't turn around, but the girls could see he was listening to them. Thank you for saving us," Rias whispered to her, giving her a small bow that was followed by a bow from Akeno, Sona and Tsubaki. "But tell me, just who are you?" The four girls stood there together, all waiting for a response from their mysterious savior. After a moment of silence they heard him speak. "I'm a friend, so to speak. Someone asked me to step into this battle if I saw any of you were in danger of being killed. Since I could see that you couldn't handle Kokebiel, I decided to step it." "So you're a devil?" Rias asked as with him nodding. "Then what part do you come from? Are you a pure blood, a reincarnated or a stray?" He let out a low chuckle at her question. "I think you already know the answer after watching." Rias nodded, thinking she knew as well, while Sona spoke up. "You're from the Phoenix family? It's strange because I don't recognize you and I recognize most in the underworld." "Correct, So-chan. Your intelligence precedes you," he said, making her blush a little from his tone before she narrowed her eyes. "Don't call me that," she said, puffing her cheeks like a child. It just made him laugh even more. "Nah, aren't you adorable? I bet Sarah-chan has the best time teasing and playing with you, doesn't she?" he said, surprising the four of them. "You know my sister?" Sona asked, looking surprised. "I know all your siblings along with your parents," he spoke as his eyes turned to look at Rias just for a second and said girl could see the calculative gaze he was giving her as if trying to make a decision about her. Naruto couldn't help but feel a little weary around her. He had not made his mind up on what to think about the Gremory girl just yet. Then why have we never seen you if you know them, and why do you keep your face hidden from us? Surely you're not an ugly person. Akeno asked, giving him an eye smile with the others leaning in. He tapped his finger on his chin as he thought about his answer. While he could not see them, he knew they were looking very inquisitive. He had missed teasing people like this. It was so easy for him. Let's just say I have been away from the underworld for a very long time and I am rethinking a few things. And I don't show my face because I don't want to, he said as he laughed when they fell flat on their faces. A phoenix symbol appeared beneath him, indicating he was about to teleport away when Sona took a quick step forward. Who are you? At least tell us your name. You already know my name, Naruto said in a tone that surprised them, since it was all serious and businesslike, just like their older siblings when they knew playtime was over. My actions today left clues as to who I am. You will just need to put the pieces together. Naruto quickly disappeared and left the four girls behind, with Sona in particular going over what he said and putting her brain into overdrive. We know who he is, she thought as Rias and Akeno began to walk away with disappointed looks on their faces while Tsubaki stuck close. We know who he from the clues he left us. What clues though? He is a member of the Phoenix family, that much is obvious. He looks older than us, but given how long devils live, he must be a century or two at least in age. He said he had not been to the underworld in many years, and he somehow knew Serafal and Rias's brother. And then there's the golden flames. Next to her, Tsubaki stood patiently before she watched in surprise when she saw her king's head suddenly shoot up and let out a rare but powerful gasp escape her mouth as she threw her hands to cover it. Golden fire, Sona whispered as her hands shook and looked back at the spot where Naruto had left. Kuchu? What is it? She asked, stepping closer to Sona and putting an arm on her shoulder. A little ways off, Naruto, who had only teleported a short distance away and was hidden behind a building, smiled at how quickly she had figured it out and mentally praised the young devil for her intelligence. Golden fire, she whispered again before looking towards Tsubaki. We're going to the underworld. I need to see Serafal immediately. Sona's Sea-Tree was not one who usually let herself get all riled up and out of breath. She was always the quiet one, the one that made logical and decisive decisions and preferred to use tactics against an opponent than brute force and raw power. It was something she inherited from her family, the Sea-Trees. Being well known for their intelligence and their water-based powers, they had always been seen as one of the strongest families around, who also had the best medical care and facilities that the underworld had to offer. It stood to reason that Sona was brought up to carry herself like a lady and to always act proper when around people. So it surprised many when they saw Sona's Sea-Tree sprinting as fast as she could down the familiar path that led to her family mansion, where she knew her sister was currently residing. Behind her, her queen Tsubaki was struggling to keep up and looked very red and out of breath as she tried to keep up with her king. Open the gate, Sona called out as she neared her family estate and watched as the guards manning the gate fumbled around for a few moments in surprise before they unlocked the gate and gave her entry towards her home. The Sea-Tree home was a large palace with 3 floors that resembled an old English royal palace. It had hundreds of rooms, with around 100 of said rooms being bedrooms for peerage members, servants and guests. Pushing the large wooden doors open, she ran into the large entrance hall with her shoes making clicking sounds against its stone floor. Sona Kaichu, please wait for me, Tsubaki called, finally catching up to her king when she showed signs of slowing down. She stood beside her as she tried to catch her breath, while Sona took little notice with her mind focused on one focus. Sona, a voice called, making the girl look to their left and see Lady Sea-Tree walking towards them, having just come from the living room with a book in her hand and hearing them enter the room. Lady Sea-Tree, mother, the 2 girls bowed as Lady Sea-Tree simply waved it off and stood just in front of them. Lady Sea-Tree was a beautiful woman who looked a lot like her youngest daughter Sona, with her hair being shoulder length but was tied up in a bun and having the same violet eyes both daughters shared. Her glasses rested on the top of her head and wore a long elegant blue dress with a white bow tied around the middle. It's nice to have you home, my daughter, she said, hugging Sona. But this is a surprise. I did not think you were returning home until the young devil's opening ceremony. What has brought about this visit? She asked with an inquisitive look firmly on her face. I just need to find Oni-sama. It of the utmost importance, mother, Sona asked. She really did not want to explain it more than she had to. It was for her sister's ears mainly. If her parents were there, then so be it. Lad Citri studied her daughter as if trying to figure what the sudden importance to see Sarafal was, since she never normally went to her sister for anything. Sarafal had a well-known streak of embarrassing her sister. But quickly she let it go as she held her arm out. "Your sister is in the study with your father. They are talking current affairs, I believe," she said as Sona quickly nodded and bowed to her mother before quickly making her way up the stairs and towards the study with Tsubaki following behind her. Lady Citri watched them go before she decided to follow after them, her interest being piqued at her youngest current behavior. She knew it must have been important if Sona was actively trying to get to her sister. Usually it was the other way round. Sona quickly made her way up the large flight of stairs before stopping at the second floor and traveled down the long hallway. She felt a little nervous and tense about the information she had for her sister. She really did not know how Sarafal would react to what she was about to tell her. Eventually getting to the study, which was at the end of the hall, she pushed the door open and walked into a large room filled with books covering every wall, which went so high that it took up part of the third floor as well. She had spent many days and nights sitting in this room and going from one book to another. She had definitely inherited the Citri family's want to learn. In the center of the room she saw who she was looking for, as her sister Sarafal was sitting lazily on a chair with a lollipop in her mouth, looking all around the room as if trying to find something to keep her from dying of boredom. Anyone that looked at Sarafal could easily see she was one of the most beautiful devils in existence, with her long dark hair that was tied up in two ponytails held together with two pink ribbons. Her eyes were violet just like Sona's and with smooth pearl-like skin. Her body, while sporting a very large bust, was small, almost childlike body, and only just hit the height of 5 feet 2. Sona almost had to groan when she saw she was still wearing her magic girl costume, something she had more than one of. Though her appearance made her look unsuspecting, she was arguably the strongest female devil in the underworld, with very few people capable of fighting her on even ground. Sona steadily approached as Tsubaki and Lady Citri walked in behind her. As she got closer, she saw Sarafal lazily look her way before her eyes went wide and a joyful look appeared on her face. Before Sona could even take another step forward, her older sister was suddenly in front of her with arms and legs wrapped around her body and hugging her as tightly as possible. Su-t-t-t-t-t-a-a-a-n-n-n-n-n. Sarafal screamed aloud as she hugged her sister to death, and sparking irritation on Sona's face. "Why is it like this every time we see each other?" she thought as she tried to wriggle out of the grasp. "Sarafal, let your sister breathe," Lady Citri admonished when she noticed Sona going a little blue in the face. Sarafal let go before she huffed in annoyance and pouted towards her mother. "But Moom, I missed my so-tan," she said, making all those in the room shake their head at her childish personality. The whole family had gotten used to Sarafal being very childlike in personality and knew that despite their attempts she would not change anytime soon. "My daughter," Lord Citri said as he got up from his seat next to where Sarafal had been sitting and embraced his youngest. "Welcome home." Lord Citri was too similar in appearance, with dark hair but dark blue eyes that neither of his children had inherited. He wore the normal royal-looking clothing that were dark blue and white. He stood about a head taller than their mother since he was tall for a devil. "Thank you, father. I hope I did not come at an inconvenient time, but I needed to speak with Oni-sama as soon as possible." "So Tan loves me. I knew it," Sarafal cheered, jumping for joy. Sarafal stopped at this instant. Lady Citri chided, which only made Sarafal stick her tongue out at her while Lord Citri sighed and rubbed his forehead. Behind Sona, Tsubaki's sweat dropped as she watched the Leviathan Satan argue with her mother, as a bonk on the head courtesy of Lady Citri just made the girl more active and did little to subdue her. "Sarafal, please calm yourself while your sister tries to speak to us," Lord Citri said to his daughter, but said girl was too hyped that her beloved little sister wanted to speak to her personally. Sarafal had a very unhealthy obsession with her sister. She was a big-time siscon. Sona watched as Sarafal whined and complained to her parents and began to grow irritated at how her sister was acting. She should have seen this coming and decided to just get the piece of information she had out there. "We were attacked by fallen angel today and was almost killed." She started making her family stop talking and look at her. She watched as her mother looked concerned while her father and sister looked angry. "Who dares attack my Sotan?" Sarafal bellowed as the ground beneath them froze suddenly at Sarafal's anger. If there was anything that got Serafal angry, it was if someone tried to hurt Sona. When did this happen, Sona? Explain everything to us, Lord Citri asked as Lady Citri checked her over, only now noticing how tired-looking Sona looked. Sona explained the ordeal that happened. How the swords of Excalibur had been taken, how she had teamed up with Rias Gremory and her peerage and 2 exorcists, and then the battle at 10-winged fallen angel Kokabiel. She could see her family were unhappy by the determined frown on her parents' faces and the look of rage on Serafal faces. They have gone too far this time, Lord Citri spoke. Why is it whenever Azazel cannot control his fallen brethren, it's the devils that have to take care of the matter? It sounds like Kokabiel was acting alone in this situation. Lady Citri spoke as her hands were on her daughter's shoulders. But still 2 heirs to 2 of the 34 families were almost killed tonight. This matter can't be left unattended, he said. I'll freeze anyone who tries to hurt my Sotan. Serafal spoke as her hands shook. The room had gone noticeably colder thanks to Serafal's ice magic. Serafal, get a hold of Lord Lucifer and the other Satans. Something must be done about this. I won't have my youngest be put in another situation like that again. Sona watched her family were about to make call to the other families. No doubt Rias had already gone to her parents and brother about what happened, and they too would most likely be less than pleased about what happened this night. They never even let her finish the story about how they were saved. She guessed her safety and that she and Rias were almost killed as the stopping point. She watched as her family conversed, her mother looking worried and her father and sister looking serious. She knew it was moments like this that Serafal stopped the childish persona and became the woman that helped stop the Devil's civil war. There's more to the story, she said, but her family hardly noticed as they were magically speaking with other people. A frown appeared on her face before she took a deep breath and said what she came there to say. I think we were saved by Naruto Phoenix. And just like she thought, everything just stopped. Her father, who was mid-sentence with Lord Gremory via communication seal, stopped mid-sentence and she watched him slowly turn his head towards her. Her mother had a similar look on her face as she had to stop her glasses from falling from her head. Serafal, on the other hand, was difficult to make out. She had froze completely and her hair was shadowing over her eyes, making it difficult for her to tell what she was thinking. She did though hear a short gasp when she heard the name. What did you say? Lady Citri asked after a moment of silence as her family's attention was completely on her. I said I think Naruto Phoenix was the one that saved us. At least I'm about 90% sure it was him, she said as Tsubaki from behind her looked a little confused. Who is Naruto Phoenix? She asked, since she was not familiar with the name other than the last name Phoenix. Lady Citri turned to look at her. Naruto Phoenix is the eldest son of Lord and Lady Phoenix and is one of the 5 heroes of the Devil's Civil War. He was a comrade of Serafal's back during the war and had a big part in ending it. He disappeared 200 years ago and has not been seen since. Not even his family know of his whereabouts. Tsubaki nodded her head as a thoughtful look appeared on her face. After a moment she gasped when she realized who they were speaking about. The golden supernova of the underworld? That's who saved us, she asked Sona, who nodded. That is one of the many nicknames he has earned thanks to his powers and skills. The other being the Yellow Flash and the true immortal Phoenix. To think he is actually still alive, Lord Citri muttered. He has been gone for so long I thought he would have died by now. There are all kinds of nasties living in the human world. Quote, beside him his wife nodded, knowing full well what kind of creatures and other entries lived in the human world. Are you positive it was him, Sona? Are you 100% sure it was him? He looked like a Phoenix member. Blonde hair, tanked skin and the blue eyes. His hair was a different shade though, form risers. It was more of a golden color. And then his fire was gold as well. He destroyed Kokabiel so quickly that it looked like he was not even trying. Her parents nodded and looked at one another. It definitely Naru-chan, Lady Citri said. He is the only devil I know who can use gold fire. We must let the Phoenix family know immediately. They will want to know about their son, especially Layla, Lord Citri mentioned, with Lady Citri nodding and placing a hand on her heart as she thought of her friend. She had seen the affect his disappearance had on the blonde woman, and even today she could see that the little spark that went out when he left never fully came back. She had locked herself away for a long time and let the bitterness towards the Gremory and Graphia build up over the years. It because of this that her social group was never fully complete anymore. She hoped this was a sign that it would change very soon. Naruto, they all heard as Sona, Tsubaki, Lady and Lord Citri all turned to look at Serafal and were all a little surprised when they saw the look of desperation that was on her face as well, giving Sona a pleading look. "Was he okay, little sister? Did he seem well?" she asked as she grabbed her sister's hands in her own and asked in a polite, shaky but serious tone. It took Sona by surprise since again it was not often she saw this kind of side of her sister. Her eyes drifted over towards her parents and she saw Lady Citri looking at Serafal sadly while Lord Citri had snaked a hand onto his eldest shoulder, giving it a light squeeze. "What am I missing?" Sona thought before turning back to Serafal. He seemed fine. He seemed to recognize Rias and I and commented that I inherited the Citri brains. He said he was a friend of his Sarah-chan and that he couldn't let his friend's baby sister get hurt. Watching Serafal, Sona watched as her expression changed and a watery smile and glazed-over eyes took over and she let out a small laugh. Her parents let a small smile appear on their faces too and she felt her sister give her hands a tight squeeze and even gently kiss her hands before letting them go. Thank you, Serafal whispered to Sona. All Sona could so is nod back dumbly before they watched Serafal walk out of the room with a beautiful smile that showed just how happy she was. He's back. Phoenix Estate. Riser Phoenix and Ruval Phoenix sat on the large hallway stairs as they watched their mother ordering many of their peerage members together and sending them to the human world. The moment the Citri had called them their mother had not stopped for a second as tears of joy fell down her face as she finally got the first real official news that the Citri and Gremory heir had seen and had been saved by her son. They watched as she ordered them around and watched as she briefly spoke with their father before he left to his office, no doubt going to see if he can get more people to help them look for their older brother. "All this fuss for nothing," Riser muttered as he glared at the ceiling while Revel played with the hem of her dress. "It's just ridiculous. Don't say such thing, brother. It might mean our big brother will come home," she said but frowned slightly when she heard him scoff. "Why should I care? It's not like I have even met him. He up and leaves long before either of us were even born. He leaves and after 200 years and the whole place is in hysterics the moment they heard there has been a sighting. Mother won't like you talking like that about him," Revel told him, but she knew he most likely was not listening to her. Her brother had been in this mood ever since he lost against the Sekiryutai Issei Hyodo in a match during the official engagement. He got defeated to the point where his healing was not going to help him and had to stay in a bed for 2 days. He thought it was a farce since he won the rating game, and yet because the Lucifer being the older brother of his former fiancée, he bent the rules and found a way for them to try again. It pissed him off so much that he began to understand a little why his mother had grown to dislike the Gremory family. If his so-called older brother was so powerful, then why did he not stick around and become a Satan like the other 4 heroes? Then the Phoenix family would have been as powerful as them and would have had a Satan on their side when this farce was performed. Though now he did have a fear over dragons that his brother Ruval loved to tease and would make dragon-like shadow puppets on the walls whenever he got the chance. "I'm out of here. No point in sticking around here when much better option lay ahead," he said before making his way to his room up the stairs. Revel knew what that meant. He wasn't actually going to bed but instead was going to bring Yubaluna into his bed. She knew this because she could hear them from time to time at night with their bedroom being close together. Plus when he got angry or annoyed, Yubaluna seemed to be the only one who could get him out of it. Revel huffed a little. Her brother was still being a bit of an ass and she knew her father had hoped his defeat would humble him in some way since Issei Hyodo was only a low-class devil. She guessed not. "At least I'm not his bishop anymore," she whispered before noticing her mother coming towards her looking a little flustered. "Daughter, where is your brother? I was hoping to get his peerage to help with the search." Layla Phoenix sounded a little desperate by the tone of her voice. Her need to find her son had now gone up drastically, almost to the amount when Naruto had first left. She did not want to lose the chance of bringing her son home. "He's gone to bed. He said he was feeling tired and had no interest in joining the search." Revel shuddered at the dark look appear on her mother's face and noticed her fists shake slightly at her side before taking a calming breath. Riser had that effect on his mother. Everyone in the family was aware that Riser never had any nice or good to say about their eldest brother. As far as he was concerned, the moment he left he gave up the right to be a member of the Phoenix family. He never fully understood why his parents, especially his mother, was obsessed with finding him. In some way she knew that he hoped Naruto never came back. Riser and Layla had gotten into many arguments when it came to the eldest Phoenix. Whenever he bad-mouthed their brother, it was their mother, father or Ruvel that would put him in his place. It always got more heated with Layla since many were aware that Naruto was the pride and joy of the Phoenix family. "That boy," Layla said, clicking her tongue through her teeth before she huffed a little in annoyance and put it in the back of her mind. "Revel, honey, do you think you could lend us a hand?" she asked politely and keeping her frustration towards her third son in check for now. She would be having words with him later on. Revel thought it over briefly before shrugging her shoulders and giving her mother a little nod, which in return got a big smile from Layla and a small kiss on the forehead. "Your brother Ruvel will be here in a few moments. You can head off with him," she said as Revel just nodded again before watching her mother leave and head towards her father's study. Revel sat quietly on the stairs as she waited for her older brother. She did not have to wait long before the Phoenix symbol appeared and a gush of fire burst out from around it. She rolled her eyes since Ruvel liked to make a flashy entrance just like Riser. Her brother Ruvel looked like an older version of Riser and was about an inch taller in height. With blonde hair and dark blue eyes like their father along with the usual tanned skin. The only thing that put him apart from Riser was that he wore dark blue noble clothing. She watched for a moment as her brother appeared in the room before she stepped forward and hugged Ruvel, who smiled at seeing her. "Little sister," he said politely as she gave him a small smile. "Mother said to go and help you look. I hope that's okay?" she asked as Ruvel let out a small chuckle. "I would be happy to have the extra help. No Riser, I take it?" he asked, looking around for his younger brother but saw her shake his head. "He said he had no desire to help," she said and watched as Ruvel clicked his tongue just like Layla had done moments ago. "Our brother can be a bit of a baka, can't he said, making her nodded profusely before looking around and behind him. "Where is Sister Conan?" she asked as she looked for her sister-in-law and brother-wife. Her brother's wife married into the family 50 years ago from the Abaddon family. She was born out of wedlock from the head of the Abaddon family and left when she was of age and became a maid for the Phoenix household. For Ruvel it was love at first sight. They married soon after and welcomed their daughter into the world 5 years ago. She is at home with Reina. She has been feeling a little under the weather, so she is going to stay at home while we look, he told her as Revel nodded. Reina was Ruvel's 5-year-old daughter. "Well, we will let mother deal with him. I believe we need to go and find our doofus of an older brother and bring him home, huh?" he said politely, nudging Revel, who laughed at the tone he spoke in before they both disappeared in the Phoenix Seal. Gremory Estate. Grafia sighed as she just finished her rounds for the day and headed back towards the bedroom she shared with her husband. She had just put Milikas to sleep and was looking forward to have her body soaked in a nice warm bath. Entering their room, she quickly undressed and folded her clothes into neat piles while doing the same for her husband's clothes, which were left out on the floor. She turned the tap on and added the necessary bubbles as she prepared herself for her bath. She undid her braids and let her silver hair fall natural to the ground, stopping just above her knees. As the water ran, she just stood and waited completely naked while dipping her foot in the water to check the temperature. A routine she had done for as long as she could remember. She sighed happily as the temperature that hit the soles of her feet and gently submerged herself. 5 minutes later, she lay comfortably in the bubble-soaked bath as a delightful hum came from her lips, enjoying the warm water soak her skin as she washed her arms with the soapy water. As she soaked in the warm bath, her minds traveled to the past years that she had spent with the Gremory family, who she could now call her own. They had been welcoming towards her, and the marriage between her and Sirzex had been a godsend to not only the family but the devil community. She remembered that day well and was a fond memory that she would always remember. That and the birth of her son. Grafia Lucifuge never had much to regret. She was a by-the-book devil who followed the rules and only disobeyed them when she believed it was harmful to other and people she loved. She didn't regret leaving the Lucifuge family since it gave her a better life in the end. She didn't regret being the maid of the Gremory family because she got to see her family every day, single day, and help them in any way that she could. She didn't regret marrying her goofball of a husband, even if he acted like a child most of the time. But the one thing she did regret and still haunted her to this day was the way her relationship ended with Naruto Phoenix, her first love. She had never intended for him to find out the way he did, and the look on his face when he saw Sirzex and her together was just too painful to put into words. The heartbreak and the rage that followed was enough for her to shake at the mere memory. The affair between herself and Sirzex was not planned in any way. It was meant to have been a one-time thing that they would both forget about, but neither did. And that grew into love. The fact that she and his best friend had betrayed him in the bed that she and Naruto had shared for so long and made love in many times always made her guilty, and the home that he had built just for them that they could one day build a family in. That had been burnt down in the wake of his rage when he discovered their betrayal. While she thought back, the idea of a family with Naruto had always tempted her and made her smile. The idea of having little blonde-haired and silver-eyed sons and silver-haired and blue-eyed daughter were enough to make her heart soar. While they were nice thoughts, inwardly she had always felt as if a part of her knew it would never happen. She still remembered one of the last intimate moments she shared with Naruto. It had been similar to how she was now. She had been lying in the bath when he came in and gave her one of the famous smiles of his that were enough to make most women quake at the knees. He had then taken her foot and then washed all up her body with the sponge before she had forced him into the tub and made love to one another. Naruto had always been an amazing lover. It was only the next week that it had all fallen apart. It was something she would always regret for the rest of her life. She hated that she strung him along like she did, but she couldn't deny her heart any longer. It wasn't fair on her or on Naruto. She loved Naruto, but she was in love with Sirzex. Her betrayal towards him was almost legendary in itself and was kept very quiet among the 34 pillars, with only the lords, ladies and heirs at the time being aware of what happened. Even her sister-in-law Rias did not know the story, and for that she was thankful. The truth about what happened between the three of them was kept very secretive, and only a select few knew the real story. If word had gotten out that the strongest queen and the current Lucifer had betrayed their closest friend and love in such a way, it would have had disastrous effects on their families and on stability of the underworld as a whole. She did not want to be sent cold looks from the red-haired girl or the younger devils like she got from Seraphol and Lady Phoenix. She had once been very close to both of them, but now Lady Phoenix despised her, and with good reason, while Seraphol would only tolerate her when at meetings or social gatherings. At meeting for the four Satan, Seraphol had made sure Sirzex knew not to bring Graphia along. She winced at the thought of Seraphol as her left hand traced along a scar along the left side of her stomach. One she received when she made the mistake of challenging Seraphol for the title of Leviathan. The two had been on equal footing with one enough in terms of experience and power, but Seraphol's rage at what they did to Naruto made her unleash all her rage and frustration onto her. While narrowly being defeated, it did send Graphia to the hospital for 2 weeks and had gained the scar in the process. Sirzex had been angry towards Seraphol, but one mention of Naruto's name and he backed off. Despite having defeated Naruto by the tiniest of margins, they all knew that Sirzex secretly feared Naruto. The Phoenix rage was not something he ever wanted to experience again, and he could have sworn that their battle took many years off his life. It did, however, give him a large burn-like scar permanently etched onto his chest, which remained a symbol of Naruto rage and his deceit. Their group that once consisted of 6 friends was now so broken she did not see any chance of it being put together. Naruto had been the glue of that group, and without him it fell apart very quickly. Seraphol became more childlike and bitter towards them. Ajuka became a recluse who barely left his lab. Falbium became so lazy that the military of the underworld barely did more than odd chores, and Sirzex would become more playful and silly. Graphia would be honest and would say that she missed him. She wanted to hold Naruto again and say how sorry she was. She wanted him to be her friend again. She wanted him to meet her son. If not for Naruto Phoenix, then she would not be with them right now. She wanted to make amends, but she just didn't know where to start. Breaking out of her thoughts, she watched as the door to the bathroom creaked open and her husband peered his head through the door and gave her a smile. She happily smiled back and motioned for him to come closer, but frowned and sat up when she saw he looked almost nervous. Sirzex never got nervous, not unless it was something she was scolding him about. Something happened. There has been a development in Kuo, he said as he walked in and sat next to the bathtub with his back to her. This now had her worried, hoping nothing happened to Rias or her cute little peerage. She listened to him explain what happened with Kokabiel and the holy swords and how they had been stolen, and was amused at how little security the church had put on those weapons. When hearing that Rias and Sona may have been killed tonight, she breathed a little harder as her anger towards fallen angels grew. Her opinion on fallen angels were not very high and she never expected much good to come from them. How did they survive the encounter? I don't recall you sending anyone to help them, she asked, a little confused at how Rias and her peerage had survived an encounter with a 10-winged fallen angel. We're not sure whether it's true yet, but Sona has a very strong suspicion who it was and matched the description of a certain someone we used to know. Lord and Lady Citri along with Seraphal have said her claim is correct from the description given. He watched her face become confused, trying to wrap her head around what he was telling her. He got her attention back though. He's come back, Grafia-chan, he said, taking her hands into his. After 200 years he finally made an appearance. And just like that she knew who he was speaking about as her free hand flew to her mouth and let her eyes widen and moist over. Grafia was not one to show her emotions to just anyone or to any situation, but the information given to her right now was too much to keep up that facade. Do they know where he currently is? She asked shakily and was quickly saddened when she saw her husband shake his head. He disappeared the moment he defeated Kokebiel. Apparently he had brief words with Sona and Rias but quickly left. Sona figured out who he was, but Rias is oblivious right now, he told her before noticing his wife's expression. He decided it was best to give her some space and left the room to let her continue bathing. Grafia stayed silent for the rest of the night and sat in the bath well after the heat from it had gone. She stared up at the ceiling for what felt like hours, mulling over this new information. Inside, and what she knew was her herd, she ached. She loved Searsex, but even now she knew a little part of her heart was always going to love the legendary Phoenix hero that made this life possible for her. With Naruto walking into his magical tent, Naruto quickly made his way inside only to stop immediately with his eyebrow beginning to twitch in annoyance. The whole place was a mess. Pillows were thrown all over the floor, plates were left out on the tables, dish rags and clothes hung on the backs of chairs, and he could have sworn he could smell a mixture of catnip and perfume lingering in the air. I leave for just a day and this happens? He spoke as he began walking forward only to stop when a figure appeared to his right and lunged at him. Sighing because she kept trying this, he simply moved out of the way and caught onto the figure's bare ankle before dangling them upside frown. Must we keep doing this, Kuroka-chan? Said woman grinned playfully at him as he dangled her upside down and had the decency to look away when her black kimono fell down revealing her naked body. Kuroka was extremely beautiful and easily one of the most beautiful women he had the pleasure of knowing. Her long flowing midnight black hair went all the way down to her lower back and her amber eyes bordered on being gold with cat-like pupils. Her black cat ears and two tails were displayed proudly and twitched every couple of moments. Her dress consisted of an elegant black kimono and walked around barefoot with a pretty-looking silver anklet wrapped around her ankle. Though wore no underwear underneath her kimono because she openly said to him many times that it felt too constricting. But it's so fun, Nyaa, she said, patting her cheek as Naruto gently lowered her to the ground when he saw her robe was slipping sewn. Mo, you're no fun, Nya, she complained as she sat up. I'm sure it is to you, but to me it shows you're a little clingy. To think the black stray cat was really a lovely house cat that JSUT wanted some attention, he said, noticing her pout and huffed in annoyance. She stood up and walked over to one of the couches where she lay on her front and dangled her feet in the air as she watched Naruto change clothes. After meeting her a few days ago, he had gotten to know the woman pretty well since she had nowhere else to go. She was a Nekosho, a very rare and endangered special of Nekomata, and was a reincarnated devil with 2 bishop pieces. She was on the run because she killed her king after finding out what he planned to do to her younger sister, who she unfortunately had to leave behind after becoming a wanted criminal. He was a little impressed that she earned a SS class status since very few strays had ever managed to do so. She was hesitant at first to stay and did try to attack him briefly, but she found herself quickly subdued. After finding out who he was, she realized that despite being strong in her own right, next to Naruto she was greatly outclassed on multiple levels. But then Naruto told her he cared little for the person she killed, stating he was a bastard from the few times he met him and he probably would have done the same thing if his siblings were threatened like that. He told her he was no going to hand her in by any means, but told her not to attack him again because he would not be as merciful next time. Kuroka was taken back a little, but she could see he was being truthful. With nowhere to go, she asked if she could stay with him, and Naruto saw nothing wrong in it. It would be quite nice to have a travel partner. Kuroka knew she would be safe with the blonde devil. I think I saw your little sister earlier, by the way, he said, getting Kuroka's attention. Amber eyes, small in stature, white hair? That's my Sharon. She is well, nya? She seems so. She was unconscious when I saw her, but physically she seemed healthy and had friends with her, he told her as he explained what had happened. That's good, she mumbled. And the fallen angel was quickly taken care of? She asked as she watched Naruto as he walked over towards her wearing a pair of sweats and a black vest, revealing his muscular frame, which if he was paying any attention made her blush a little. He is long dead. I don't see anyone surviving being turned into ash particles, he said as Kuroka nodded and was inwardly happy that her little sister was safe. As he went to sit down on one of the opposite couches, he stopped when Kuroka took his hand and guided him onto her couch. As she sat up, she pushed him onto his front before straddling his back. When she saw him looking at her with a raised eyebrow, she giggled. I'm giving you a massage. It's the least I can do after all for saving my sister and giving me a place to crash, nya. I have very magical fingertips, she whispered into his ear, making her hot breath tickle against his skin. Knowing there was no point in fighting this, he shrugged and lay his head down as he felt Kuroka's hands rub against his shoulders and push down against the muscles. He had to admit she was not lying with the magical fingers, as she sent waves of pleasure and ease through his body as she massaged each muscle extensively. He had been given massages before from Yasaka, but Kuroka had the magical touch. His whole body was quickly feeling at ease and didn't feel like moving anytime soon. Where did you learn this? He asked as he put his hands beneath his chin as she worked on the middle of his back. The response he got was a little giggle. Being on the run for 7 years has allowed me to pick up certain skills along the way. Massages is a great way to pickpocket people and gain some extra cash, as well as knock them out with the right touches. Plus it's handy that I am natural at it, she told him as she just watched him nod. She wondered if he was even listening. On top of him, Kuroka was smiling coyly at the reaction she was getting from the powerful devil. She found out very quickly that he was a powerful person, and tea helped that he was so nice and giving on top of that. His power felt almost endless and it inwardly thrilled her. She was an attractive female who desires to be taken by a powerful male. If she could lay with this man, then she might have the chance to complete what she had always desired. Being a little daring, she leaned down and pressed her large bust against his back and breathed hot air into his ear that made his neck hair stand on end. Is there any other way I could say thank you for looking after me? She whispered idly in his ear and putting her attractiveness to good use. She firmly believed that if you had it, then you should flaunt it. Before she could say anything else, though, she suddenly felt her hair fall freely down her back and a sudden lightness hit her head. Her hands trailed up to her hair and gasped when she felt her headband was not there anymore, but was instead in the hands of the man beneath her. This is a very beautiful headband, he said, looking it over. It shows true craftsmanship. Where did you get it? My mother gave it to me when I was a little girl. Just before she passed, she answered with the gobsmacked look not leaving her face. He then placed it gently back in her hair. It suits you, but you should let your hair down more. It's a shame to let such beautiful hair stay pinned up all the time, he said, giving her a smile that was now making her feel flushed. Oh God, what's happening to me? She thought as she watched Naruto turn back around and pick up a communication seal slip that had began glowing for the last few seconds. Answering it, she saw a beautiful blonde woman with fox ears on her head, and from what she could tell, she was looking similar to her with a flushed appearance on her face. Naruto, I need you, NOW. They both got the message loud and clear as she watched Naruto remove himself from beneath her. He told her would most likely see her tomorrow or maybe even in a few days before he left quickly, going to keep his beautiful and by the looks of it very horny kitsune woman satisfied. He almost forgot it was the kitsune mating season. He was in for a hell of a night. As he left and told her to stay out of trouble, Kuroka just sat there in silence with her eyes still wide as her hands clutched her headband. At that moment, Naruto not only gained her trust and loyalty, but he also just gained her love and heart. The blonde phoenix sighed as he stared up at his tent ceiling as he mulled over the position that kept waking up in for the last week. Since coming back from his session with Yasaka the Nekosho, that he had been letting bunk with him for the last 2 weeks and become extremely clingy and needy. When he came back, he was greeted to a very naked Kuroka lying in his bed, waiting for him to return with a very sly and wry look on her face. It didn't take a genius what she wants from him, but he turned her down on the account that they had barely known one another, but it didn't stop her advances. Oh, was he tempted, but 200 years of learning restraint had finally paid off. So during their free time he got to know Kuroka and learn as much about her as she wanted to let out. Her favorite color was amber, her favorite food was sushi, which was not much of a surprise. She loved wearing kimonos but hated wearing underwear since it made her feel too constricted. She was 23 years old and even admitted to him that despite her flirty personality and constant UAL teasing, she was still in fact a virgin and was waiting for that special someone. Now though he was lying in his bed with a pair of silky smooth arms wrapped around his chest with two extremely soft and bouncy mounds pressed hard against his chest. They were so warm he really wanted to just stick his head there and let them lull him to sleep. Soft purrs came from the black-haired girl as she gently slept, letting soft and cute snores come from her when she wrinkled her face. Like any cat, she seemed to gravitate towards anything that was warm. Given he was a phoenix, it didn't take long until she kept creeping into his bed every night. He tried to wriggle out of her grasp, but her arms quickly locked around his chest, stopping him from moving as well as moving her face up his body and settling in the crook of his neck. Every morning, he whined in his head before he shivered when Kuroka unconsciously licked his neck with her tongue. His restraint was only so big, and if she kept up these actions it would definitely end with him taking her right then and there. "She doesn't make this easy," he muttered before grabbing one of the large pillows his head rested on and slowly managed to switch himself with the pillow. He watched her face scrunch up and hold onto the pillow tighter, already noticing the switch, and was not happy with the loss of her heat source. She moaned in her sleep in annoyance while Naruto took the moment to shower and get dressed. Thanks to heating ruins he placed on the water supply, it always came out warm from the tap or showerhead. A renewal ruin was also placed on the tank so he never ran out of water. That would have sucked big time. Hygiene was always something he was taught to care greatly for, plus girls loved men who smelled nice. Once he was changed into his day clothing he went to the kitchen and began making breakfast. In 200 years of being on his own, things like cooking and cleaning was something he desperately needed to learn, especially cooking. While he could make a decent meal and was very good with the basic stuff, the complicated the meal to more time and tries he would have to put in. For this morning he stuck with a simple English breakfast with scrambled egg, toast, bits of bacon, tomato and sausages. On the side was a juicer where he would make freshly squeezed orange juice. There was nothing better than eating something that you made from scratch. As he whistled a tune and tapped his foot on the ground as he made breakfast, he was not surprised to feel long slender arms wrap around his waists and for a soft cheek to rub against the arch of his back. "Good morning, Nya. Come back to bed with me. I want my heat source back," she purred as low purring reached his ears. Turning his head he saw she was only being covered in the bed covers with her cat ears and tails out proudly and twitching every couple of seconds. "Sorry Kuro-chan, but I have business to take care of today." "Oh, business, hun Nya?" she asked as her hands roamed all over his chest. They slid down his front as she felt his muscles and admired amazing physique that he had earned thanks to healthy living, plenty of training and the odd tumble in the bed. Though when her hands began traveling a little too south for his liking, he quickly playfully swatted them away much to her disappointment. She had tried to see his member over the last week, but somehow he kept covering it up at the last moment or turning to face the other way just when she got close. Even when he was asleep he somehow kept avoiding her gaze. "Maybe I can come with you on this business? I can wear a white business suit. I promise you will like it, Nya." She thought she had him when Kuroka saw him lean down at her and faced her with his face only a few inches from her face. Then he saw her lean in and Kuroka for the first time in a long time felt a blush beginning to form. She closed her eyes and puckered her lips as she prepared to feel his lips crash, not her. But instead Naruto's finger was placed on her lips. "Maybe next time, Kuro-chan." She saw the playful grin appear on his face as her blush was revealed on her face. She pouted and whipped around to face the opposite direction as her arms crossed below her ass and tried to look annoyed at him leading her on like that. They sat in silence for about 10 minutes as Naruto laid breakfast put in front of them, getting a small thankful from Kuroka as she began to eat. For a girl with a body like Kuroka's, she sure ate a lot. Once he had finished and washed his plate he went to exit the kitchen and was preparing to leave. "And what is it that's so important that I can't go with you?" She finally asked, still with her arms crossed as she turned to look at him. She saw him glance in her direction as he put his shoes on. "I'm visiting an old friend today, and if you came with me, I could not guarantee that you would return unscathed," he said, serious as he left the kitchen and grabbed a jacket. "While I admit we have not known each other very long, where I am going could put you at risk as you currently are," he said, making her realize he was talking about the underworld. "I kinda like you, Kuroka, and I will admit I have enjoyed having you around lately. So you have to understand that if I say it's too dangerous for you, then I mean it as the truth." Kuroka stood watching him, frowning. "He just doesn't want me to get hurt," she thought before she quick-paced over to him. A week with Naruto had made her see the different sides to him. The soft, kind, gentle and goofy side that he mostly showed. There was also the serious and stern side when business or things along that line came up. Then she knew by reputation the third side to him was the ruthless and merciless warrior that was responsible for defeating the old devil faction. He was both a complicated and simple person, and he intrigued her to no end. She pressed herself against him and looked up at him with her big amber eyes staring directly into his blue ones. "But you will come back safe, right?" she asked with a soft voice that Naruto recognized as the real Kuroka, when she was not trying to flirt or tease her way into getting something. "I'll come back, I promise," he said, and chuckled when she stuck out her pinky finger. He interlaced it with his own and then watched as she leaned up and placed a soft kiss on his cheek as her cheek went a little red before she disappeared to finish breakfast. Naruto stood there for a moment, wondering just what had gotten into Kuroka this past week before deciding to put it to the back of his mind for now. Kuroka meanwhile ate her breakfast, wondering when the right time was to tell him that she was his now and until forever. Underworld. Stepping out of the Phoenix magic symbol, Naruto quickly found himself standing outside of a large castle that stood out in the middle of nowhere with no signs of life anywhere within the vicinity. Of course he chose somewhere so recluse, he said to himself as he walked forward and, showing great strength, pushed the large wooden doors open and began walking inside. The great hallway was lit up like a Christmas tree. Multiple doors lay on each side of the wall with a large elevator right at the end with metal doors. Beside the elevator doors he saw an intercom system. Walking forward he pushed for the elevator doors to open but was not surprised when they refused to open, and he heard a voice call out from the intercom system. "Who is it? I'm too busy to see anyone right now. Make an appointment or something," a dreary voice called, making his eyes roll and shake his head. He leaned forward and pushed the button of the intercom. "Hey dumb ass, you either let me down to that home you call a lab or I will burn this place to the ground and roast your ass." He was not surprised that he got silence for the next 30 seconds before the voice spoke again. "Naruto?" Looking up to the right corner of the ceiling he saw a video camera moving in his direction and stopped when it landed on him. He gave the camera a wave, and it was only a second later that the elevator activated and the metal doors opened. A minute later Naruto watched as the elevator doors opened and he found himself staring at a large warehouse-like room underneath castle with countless test tubes, crash test dummies, machines, tanks, giant chess pieces and all kind of weird stuff that he would expect from the man he was visiting. Walking forward, it did not take Naruto long to find the person he was looking for. Said person has a very powerful and recognizable signature. "Ijuka," Naruto said, letting a small smirk appear on his face as the man in question turned around and lifted his welding visor to reveal a young man the same age as Naruto. Ijuka was a handsome man with short black messy hair and brown eyes with a light complex. While other devils would have worn royal-looking robes specifically designed for pure blood devils, Ijuka stuck with a tattered pair of jeans and a greased shirt that had rips going up and down the sleeves. "Naruto Phoenix, it's about damn time you came back," the said, standing up, standing at a similar height to Naruto as the two grasped hands before going in for a one-armed hug, patting the other's back as they did. While he was not as close to Ijuka as he had been with Sirzex or Serafal, he was still a greatly valued friend and comrade who had each other's back during the Devil Civil War. He was the same age as Naruto and Sirzex and had been part of their group of friends for as long as he could remember. "Well, I guess I had to come home eventually," he said, taking a step back and looking around the place. "I guess I should not be surprised that the current Beelzebub has not changed all that much." "You're back for good now? I can name a lot of people that would be very happy with that." "Not quite home yet," Naruto said, watching Ijuka's face fall slightly. "I'll be coming home soon, but let's just say I have a few loose ends I need to tie up first." I'm actually here because I need something from you. Ijuka's eyes shot up in surprise. The last he checked, Naruto never asked much from anyone. Normally it was the other way round. Looking at Naruto curiously, he asked, "What did you have in mind?" Naruto pointed to the desk that Ijuka was working on and picked up a king chess piece as he held it out in his hand and examined. That alone gave Ijuka an idea of what his old friend had planned. "Well, I have heard about your creation of the evil piece system back when it was first made. Hats off to you for that one, by the way," he said as Ijuka mocked, bowed and motioned for him to continue. "I am coming to ask if you wouldn't mind creating a set of evil pieces for me?" "You serious?" Ijuka asked skeptically before Naruto nodded. "Why now of all times? Let's just say I have met some people in my time away and I would like to have them around in the underworld with me when I come back." Ijuka just stared at him for a moment before he shrugged. "Sure, why not," he said before motioning for him to follow him through the lab. "I actually already have a set created you for back when they first created. The first sets I ever made were mine, yours, Seraphal's, Falbium and Searzek's. You're the last of the 5 of us to come and collect his set." Naruto just nodded as they arrived at some kind of large locker system spread across an entire part of the underground lab. They had letters on separate categories of the lockers with the first letter from the surname. P. Ah, here we are," Ijuka said as his wings appeared out of his back and he flew up into the air. Naruto watched him open one of the lockers and take out a small chessboard which he could see had the phoenix symbol on the front of it. He watched Ijuka blow the dust of the top of the evil piece set and showing just how long it had been there. He then came back to the ground. "You want me to explain how the system works?" he asked as Naruto nodded. Though he had a brief understanding, it would be better to hear it from the guy that made it and was the reason the devil population had managed to increase over the years. Each piece has a corresponding value and these values are used to determine which piece may be used to reincarnate someone. Their strengths, talents, and skills play a large role in determining their value. Different evil pieces cannot be used together. Evil pieces can also be exchanged between top-class devils with peerage and only a high-class devil and above can have one. "I'm safe then," Naruto joked as Ijuka rolled his eyes. "You will take the king piece," he said showing Naruto a golden-colored king chess piece. "You have 1 queen, 2 bishops, 2 rooks, 2 knight and 8 pawns. Though the more powerful the person is the more pieces they take up. Rooks are worth 5 pawn pieces, knights are worth 3 as are bishops and the queen piece is worth 9. Naruto nodded as Ijuka handed over the chessboard and Naruto looked over at the evil pieces that were tucked away inside the board. To use them, just sit them down and say the reincarnation words and then press it against their chest. "Sounds easy enough," Naruto said as a thought came across him when his thoughts went to a certain stray cat. Hypothetically, would it be possible to bring in a person who already has an evil piece within them but is no longer part of a peerage? #2. Ijuka looked at him oddly. "It sounds like you're talking about a stray devil?" he asked, but Naruto just looked at him, waiting for an answer. Ijuka sighed before scratching the back of his head. "It's possible if the correct situation is met. If said reincarnated devil has been released from the peerage, then it is possible. Another way would be to just trade the pieces that it took to reincarnate the person and give your free pieces to the high-class devil." "What if that devil was dead?" he asked in all seriousness and saw Ijuka narrow his eyes slightly and look his friend over. It was an odd thing for him to ask, but he answered it anyway. "If the devil died, then the piece or pieces will still be active within their body. However, if another devil wants them to join the peerage, then all they would need to do is do the natural ritual. The old pieces will be replaced with the new pieces. As long as they're not part of a major house, then it shouldn't be a problem." Naruto nodded and clutched the evil piece set closely. That was what he had hoped, and it would not be as much as a problem as he thought. The only problem he could see would be the family of the devil that she killed wanting her head. But if that matter appeared, then he would sort it out. The devil she was linked to was a piece of shit as far as he was concerned, and the underworld was better off without him. "You staying here long or are you leaving right away? I know of some people that would very much like to see you." Naruto nodded. "I will be coming back to the underworld properly within the next week or so. I'll see them then. If I know Seraphal as well as I do, she will no doubt find out the moment I step back on Phoenix soil." Ijuka nodded but out his hands in his pockets. "I was actually talking about them," he said with Naruto now narrowing his eyes, knowing full well who he was talking about. I have nothing I want to say to those two backstabbers, he said as Ajuka put his hands out in his defense. Hey, I know what they did was bad but they are sorry and I know they want you to know that. Grafia especially, he told him, but Naruto just continued to glare at him. Did you know they named you Milika's godfather? That made the glare Naruto was giving him to soften, but he shook his head. It doesn't matter. If either of those two dare to try and speak with me and tell me how sorry they are, then they can kiss my ass for all I care. Ajuka gulped as he felt the temperature go up slightly. I have no hate for their kid and I'm sure he is a sweet boy, but I want nothing to do with that family. Not again. Ajuka nodded and thought it was best to let the topic rest now. He had seen Naruto when he got angry and even he did not wish to fight him when he was like that. The two old friend caught up and Naruto spoke about the things he had seen, done and the people he had met while he asked Ajuka what life as a Satan was like. The simple answer was that it was boring and he really hoped to retire within the next century. Being a Satan was not all it was cracked up to be. Later that day, Naruto returned to his temporary residence just in time for dinner as H quickly smelt the delicious aroma of dinner waft towards his nose as he got closer to the tent. Smiling at the thought of having a nice, warm dinner, he quickly frowned when he felt two other presences inside the tent. He didn't recognize either of them and that worried him somewhat. Stepping inside, he saw Kuroka in her usual black robe with her arms crossed in front of her as two boys looking around the age of 18 stood in front of her. One had blonde hair that was neatly swept to one side with blue eyes and wore glasses that rested on the bridge of his nose. He wore a smart-looking business suit with a sword that made his senses go haywire over. A holy sword that was more commonly known as Caliburn. The other was a man with monkey-like features with dark hair and black eyes. What stood out about him was that he was wearing Chinese armor that dated back to the Three Kingdoms era of China and wielded a dark red staff that was draped over his shoulder. Valley wants us to unite now, Kuroka. His betrayal to Azazel will commence soon and he will need us all there with him, he heard the blonde boy say in a soft voice. The busty red-head Gremory girl and her peerage met him when he introduced himself to the Securite. They have been a little on edge about him since they found out he has Albion. I know, it's just, something came up. Something I was not expecting to happen. I can't leave now. The Chaos Brigade will be moving soon, Kuroka. We need you to come with us now. If you don't, then your safety will be in jeopardy. Quote. Kuroka nodded to them but now noticed Naruto looking towards them with a serious look on his face. Naruto-kun, she said happily, almost forgetting they had company. She had just finished cooking dinner when her two guests had appeared. She was not entirely sure how they managed to find her, but she knew they had friends who would make it look like child play to find someone. Who are you and why are you here? Naruto asked, removing his jacket and making his way over towards the two. My name is Arthur Pendragon, descendant of King Arthur Pendragon, the blonde boy introduced. And this is Baku, descendant of Sun Wukong. We are here to collect our comrade. Comrade, huh? He asked and saw Kuroka gulp as her ears and tails drooped. She forgot to mention that. Forgot or not, she needs to come with us. Our group leader is expecting us all back soon. Well, I think Kuro-chan has made it clear that she does not want to go with you, so you'll find that you will be leaving empty-handed, he said as he took a step closer. We don't not wish to fight with you, devil, but we will if it proves necessary, Arthur stated as his fingers tips brushed against Caliburn. We were also here to ask you, Naruto Phoenix, if you would join the Chaos Brigade. A snort was their answer. I already gave my answer and I declined. Whoever your boss is should really stop trying to recruit me. I have no interest in your little group. I see, well, it was either that or we should try to eliminate you, the boy said as Naruto watched his body tense up, as did Baku, who had a playful look appear on his face. Boy, you're 200 years too young to even think about challenging me. Call it what you will, but I know my power and I can sense yours. I've met the true Monkey King Sun Wukong and you don't even compare to him, he said to Baku, who gulped slightly at the mention of his ancestor. And you, he said, now looking at Arthur. If you think just because you wield one of the strongest holy swords and that it makes you indestructible, then you are greatly mistaken. I have fought against that sword before along with its sister swords. So do not think it scares me in the slightest, because I have seen much worse. The moment he did though, he saw Baku extend his staff and it shoot towards him while Arthur drew Caliburn. He narrowed his eyes at the staff and saw it was covered in a thick veil of energy that he was familiar with. Senjutsu. The staff was about to hit him when Baku, Arthur and even Kuroka were surprised to see Naruto simply move his head to the side before he grabbed the staff. By grabbing it he yanked it forward, making Baku fly forward in surprise before a fire-enhanced kick slammed into his stomach, knocking the wind out of him completely. Arthur held Caliburn out in front of him and looked ready to strike with the holy sword but had to stop when Kuroka appeared in front of him with her eyes looking more cat-like and let out a low hiss from her mouth and arms stretched out in a protective manner. "Don't touch my chosen or I will put you in the ground, nya," she said venomously, and the three males were surprised at how violent she sounded. The way she said it made it sound so toxic that Arthur and Baku both had to take a step back from how surprised they were. Naruto eyed her curiously as fire danced around his hands before he decided to put it out. He thought over what Kuroka has just said but would come back to it momentarily. "Leave," was all Naruto said as he flared his power once again, but this time at a level of an ultimate class devil. It made the entire room shake and they could hear the wind increase all around them. The ground beneath them shook as well while anything made of glass within the magical tent began to crack over. Outside the trees looked ready to be blown away while the sky darkened as clouds began to form tornadoes in the sky. Yet the temperature instead of dropping only increased and made the two members of the Chaos Brigade begin to sweat. Not saying a word, Naruto and Kuroka watched a magic seal appear beneath Baku and Arthur and teleported them away. Once they were gone, Naruto powered his aura down and everything returned to normal. Kuroka stood there looking a little shaken up and turned to look at Naruto, who was still standing behind her. When she did though, she saw his eyes were narrowed and were looking at her as if waiting for answers. "Explain right now, Kuroka," he said to her in all seriousness. All she could do was nod her head. After spending 5 minutes of cleaning up the tent after Naruto flaring his power made a big mess within it, Naruto now sat in front of Kuroka with his arms crossed while Kuroka shuffled nervously in her seat. "They found and recruited me about 6 months ago," she explained. "I was found by Arthur in rough shape and he took me to a small base they had set up with the rest of their team. They healed me and explained what they were doing. I admit I was interested in what they were offering in their team or faction, as it were a little different from the rest. They don't follow the Chaos Brigade's roles per se, but it sort of links into it. Going on adventures all around the world, fighting strong people, stuff like that. The leader of this group in particular is kind of a fight nut." "Who is he?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. Valley Lucifer," she said, and noticed a low hum come from his chest as he clenched his fists. "He also happens to be the wielder of the Divine Dividing." Naruto nodded. "It just means I'll have to use more force to put him down," he thought. He did not trust any member of the old faction, especially not the old Satan families. All the ones he met were all the same. Power crazy and only desired the power to rule and hurt people. He doubted this Valley was any different from the rest. His goal is to fight the true dragon. He thinks because he has the divine dividing that contains the white vanishing dragon that it gives him the ability to kill the true dragon. He wants to prove his strength to everyone. Naruto though snorted. The true dragon. The boy is delirious with power. The true dragon is the strongest entity in the world, made up of infinite and endless power. Not with an army of ultimate class devils could you beat it. "Who else is in the Chaos Brigade?" he asked and saw her shrug. "I'm not entirely sure. In the Valley team other than Valley, Baku and Arthur, the only other person I met was Arthur's little sister Lefay. She is a practicing magician who is hoping to be as strong as her ancestor Morgan Le Fay." "No one else? Nothing more of importance? What about a leader behind this Chaos Brigade? Who put it together?" he asked, and she shook her head negatively. "The factions, as you could say, don't really associate much with each other. They do their own thing," she said thoughtfully. "Leader-wise though, I'm afraid I don't know. Whoever it is, only Valley knew who it was. When we asked, he just said in due time and that we would have to wait." Sighing, Naruto just nodded while scratching the back of his head. It was a start at least. If this Valley Lucifer was in any way connected to the old Satan faction, then as far as he was concerned, the boy was as good as dead, along with any other members of the old faction that dared to show up. It was not a lot of info since the Chaos Brigade obviously did not want to reveal too much to new members too quickly, but it was a start. At least now he knew that two descendants of Arthur Pendragon and Morgan Le Fay was involved as well as a descendant of Sun Wukong. Alright, well, it's a start at least, he said before he leaned forward towards Kuroka and motioned for her to lean forward too. Now why don't you explain what you meant by, "you're chosen"? Quickly he saw her face heat up and gulped slightly as Kuroka fidgeted on her seat, avoiding eye contact with him. His hand came up to her chin though and gently made her look at him. "Please explain, Kuroka-chan, what did you mean?" She bit her lip and saw she was trying to nuzzle her face with his hand that was still resting on her chin. It was very affectionate as well, and saw her face getting more and more heated. "You did this to me. You made me yours," she said gently, making him look at her surprised. "I did no such thing, Kuroka-chan. We have been friendly and you have been clingier with me, but I have never said you're mine." "You took my headband," she told him, getting a confused look. "Ever since I was little I said if anyone was able to remove my headband from my head, then that would be the person I would commit myself to forever." Naruto face now looked at her with widened eyes and a jaw threatening to fall to the ground. I didn't know." "I know you didn't, but for female nekosho is very important. We all have our ways of finding our life mates. I always knew I wanted a strong person as a mate, and I knew for a nekosho I was gifted with our techniques and abilities. So I decided that the moment a strong man was able to take my headband, that would be the person I chose as my mate and had babies with." "Babies?" Naruto asked, taking a deep breath. "Of course. Whoever I choose as my life mate will eventually give me babies." The blonde devil just nodded. If his mother was here she would probably be telling him to go for it and give her lots of grandchildren to spoil. But since Kuroka was a wanted devil, he questioned how she would feel about it. He would admit Kuroka would without a doubt be a great lover, and seeing her as a potential girlfriend, life mate did draw him in. But there was also Yasaka back in Kyoto that in a way he had promised himself to. While he did not want to turn Kuroka down, he would need to speak with Yasaka first. Kuroka, though, who was still in front of him, breathed deeply and got up on the counter and began crawling towards him. Her nerves seemingly disappeared and now had her flirty look on her face. She sat up on her knees in front of Naruto and with a sudden pull removed his kimono from the top part of her body, revealing her large bust for Naruto to see. Grabbing his hand, she placed it on her and where her heart was. "This could all be yours. I won't take no for an answer. I'm yours now whether you like it or not. My heart will be yours and yours only," she said as she closed her eyes and felt his hand on her. "I don't care if you already have a relationship with that Kitsune woman. I can see you two are close and I am willing to share you if need be. You're a powerful male and powerful males take on more than one woman. Make me one of them. I want you to take me and put babies in me," she said, almost moaning as she guided his hand down towards her toned flat stomach. "Kuroka-chan," he said as her face came forward and captured his mouth with her own. He couldn't help but moan as they both deepened the kiss as he grabbed her and settled her on his lap with her legs wrapping round his midsection. "Before we do that," he said, breaking the kiss, getting an annoyed groan from her. "I have an offer to make you." He then went into his pants pocket and to Kuroka's surprise pull out a bishop piece. He sat her back on the counter and placed the two bishop pieces on the counter next to her, her eyes not leaving the golden bishop pieces. "I'm planning on returning to the underworld soon and I want you to be my bishop," he told her as she still looked slightly shocked. "But I can't." "Yeah, you can. I spoke with the guy that's make them. If you accept these pieces, the old pieces will be removed and you will be part of my peerage." "But my criminal status? Let me take care of that. You will find that when it comes to the four Satans I have a lot of sway over them. Plus once you become part of my peerage you are under the Phoenix name. Meaning they can't touch you. If they dared then I would just send them packing," he said, grinning at her before he turned away and headed out. "Wait, where are you going?" she asked in confusion. So much had happened this evening that it felt like her brain was going to burn out. "A guest is here. I'll be back in a moment. Think over my proposition and I will think over yours," he told her, and she just nodded dumbly. Outside, Naruto stood facing forward. "A second visit. What is it this time?" he asked as Azazel appeared before him with a serious look on his face. "Something that will take your interest." 3 days later. "Kateria, please don't do this," Serafal shouted as she stared up at a brown-haired woman wearing a revealing top and wore glasses over her eyes. A pair of devil wings were flapping in the air behind her, keeping her elevated while she sneered down at Serafal and the group that was amassed around her. The reason Seraphol was there was because she and Seer's ex Lucifer, who stood beside her with his wife Graphia, were currently representing the devil community, as a meeting between the three factions was set up in order to set up a new alliance and peace treaty between the three factions. Representing the fallen angel was the general of the Grigori Azazel, who came with his ally Valley, who was a silver-haired boy in his late teens. On the angel side was Seraph Gabriel and the current archangel Michael, who both had blonde hair and blue eyes with a halo hovering above their heads. Gabriel had 10 white wings while Michael had 12 golden wings. The meeting had gone off well, with a debate on the Kokabiel incident starting it off. Rias Gremory and Sona Citri had given their thoughts and stories on the matter, along with the thoughts of the Rias's pawn Ise Hyodo. Then Azazel had brought up the problem with the Chaos Brigade, and that when everything took a turn. Rias's Bishop Gasper's sacred gear was suddenly unleashed and everything around them had stopped, with only the leaders and selected members of the rest being able to move, and quickly determined that the Y were under attack. Rias went with her peerage to find Gasper and save him from the people that were trying to use his sacred gear to hurt them, while the leaders and Sona all stood within the confines of the meeting room. At least they did, until an explosion caused them to abandon the room and gather outside. When they did, the old symbol of Leviathan appeared and revealed Kateria Leviathan, the last known descendant of the Leviathan family. "You took everything from my family. You Seraphol Citri have what belongs to me. I want it back," she sneered as she held a staff in her hand and magic seals appeared in front of it. "So which of you will be the first to fall?" From the group, Azazel walked forwards and stared up at the old faction member and put his hands in his pockets as he stared up at her. "So the governor of the Grigori comes first to die," she said before her eyes narrowed when she saw him shake his head. "Nah, I'm not really in the mood to fight today," he said, getting odd looks from everyone who was watching. Michael and Seerzex both raised their eyebrows at the man who in their opinion always had a plan for the worst. "Though you do have an opponent if you really want one. He has been itching for a fight with people like you for a while." Who is this trash you speak of?" Azazel smirked as his hand pointed upwards. "Look up." "What?" she asked as she looked up. When she did, her face morphed into a look of terror just as a large comet-like fireball suddenly slammed into her face and slammed her right into the ground, making a giant crater form in the earth. Before anyone could speak, an enormous wall of fire easily around 200 meters tall suddenly circled around the academy, while previously clear skies suddenly darkened over and enormous clouds began to form. "What's happening?" Sona asked before she looked around and noticed everyone had a different look on their faces. Seraphol looked ready to start crying as her hand over her mouth. Seerzex looked very nervous while Graphia was biting her lip hard enough to make blood draw. Michael and Gabriel looked slightly concerned while Azazel was grinning. "Oni-san, what's happening?" Sona asked as a powerful presence appeared on the roof of Kuo Academy. When they saw who it was, she heard Seraphol begin sobbing. Sona quickly understood why. Naruto Phoenix stood on top of Kuo Academy, looking not much different to how they remembered him. There were a few changes, such as the scar over his eye, but he looked as if he had not aged a day. Naruto took a deep breath as he looked down towards the group and saw Azazel nod over at him. He saw Michael and Gabriel and gave them both a small nod and saw them do the same. Seraphol he had to smile at, and his eyes softened when he saw her upset. No doubt he was in for either a massive hug or a giant slap from the dark-haired girl. He turned his head and then he saw the two he was least looking forward to seeing again. He saw them both looking up at him, one with a sad expression and one with a nervous expression. When his eyes narrowed at them, he saw both Seerzex and Graphia turn to look away. Everyone watched as 1 second he was on the roof and then the next he was standing by the crater Teat Kateria was climbing out of. Said girl had scorch mark across her face with a murderous expression on her face, her staff gripped tightly in her hand. Who dares? Looking up, she saw Naruto standing there and her blood ran cold when she noticed who it was that had hit her with the fireball.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.